Oh, 30 seconds.
Okay, we'll start.
Is Chris on the line?
Yes.
Chris is on the line. All right, we'll call the meeting to order 20 seconds early, so
Thank you.
we'll get there. Everybody's here, which is great. And now it's time for the open forum. So if you'd like to address the council, if you're not on the agenda, or even if you are on the agenda and want to address the council, now's the time to do it. Anybody? Anybody? You're on the agenda.
So then I can address at the time?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, you can still come up and talk. if
I
you
will
want.
wait, I will wait.
All right. Anybody else? All right, hearing none, then we'll close the open forum and move on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda has typical 3 items on it. Unless somebody would like to pull one for consideration, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Oh, yeah, we need to, there we go, we need to add a few things to the agenda. One of the things to add to the agenda, we'll probably add that right before the Planning Commission report, is a revisitation of the right-of-way license that we issued to Buck's Hardware and to Buck Benson. And then, do you want to hand these out now? Or hand
People
them
need them. Just, they've been sent around, so.
Okay.
Is that what we got
Yep,
Yeah.
so this is the
yesterday?
right-of-way
Today.
for Bucks.
I haven't read it.
Okay. And then,
Just set the agenda first.
yes. So then we have a couple of personnel items to add when we get down by council and staff reports. So those things will add to the agenda.
Public personnel items?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I already got the whole thing.
So with those things added to the agenda, unless there's something else that we'd like to discuss, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. All right, so we're going to move right on to the Senty variance request. So,
I thought you were.
oh no, the Bucks thing, yeah. Gosh, my attention span
Do you
is
have the rest
a
of the
bit
stuff over
short.
there? Can we?
So, if you guys want to come up, you can, or Buck, you can come up. So, just to summarize what we're talking about here, at a previous meeting, a couple meetings ago, we approved a right-of-way license for Buck to maintain his gas tanks underground under the right-of-way on First Street. Yep. And it has since come to our attention that the term for that license, that you'd like it to be longer, and so that's what we're up against right now.
Copy of that for yourself. I don't have them either anymore.
Oh, okay.
Disappeared.
Here,
You can share
I've read it.
all of
I've
it.
read it.
You can
There's
share
a
it.
few up here if people want to see. That's the list.
I have
Yep.
not looked at mine.
So there's a number of things here that have been requested to be changed.
Well, the contract is, I didn't copy that.
So, do we need a second to read through the memo and make sure that we've got this? I got this understood. So we're looking at some language in a couple of the sections here that talk about no other reasonable alternative for improvements that would interfere with the right-of-way. The term itself would be extended from the 15 years to the 26 years, and I believe that is due to the nature of the
Yeah, the
financing for the
financing,
sale of the...
requirement. I apologize to have to come take up more of your time, but that came as a surprise to me, so in order to keep the financing moving, we are asking for that change.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to say about the other amendments to that license? Like any?
Yeah, The one amendment for the bank to have the ability, if there's a failure in the contract, that they could assume whatever's left in the balance of the license, so they feel secure in making the loan.
Okay. And now that's the fourth one, section 19E.
Yeah.
Add mortgage holders' right of assumed license
Yeah.
requirements. All right. And then is there, the other ones of these, I'm not completely 100% up
They-
to speed about a lot of about these other ones, but addition of a list of reasons that it may take longer than 180 days to remove improvements and restore right of way.
Well, it's more or less to spell something out that we probably took to be common sense, like you obviously can't pave in January, or so expectation that falls that you're not required to do some of that work when you can't do the work.
Okay. And then that other one, the no other reasonable alternative can be accommodated. The city determines that the improvements interfere with necessary work in the right of way. That, I understand that to be, that's kind of just a protection to make sure that for you, the last thing that would be done would be moving them, unless there's some other way to work
Yeah.
around it.
Just there again, that was some of the language that the bank asked for,
Okay.
and it didn't seem unreasonable, so.
Does anybody have any thoughts about this or any considerations for the requests? These
Yeah,
requests?
I read through it, and I'd also talked to Buck, and I talked to Stephen Stiles, to the purchaser of the property, and, I see this as really continuation of the conversation we had when we granted the license, and that we granted it for 15 years, and it seems that the lender is asking for some additional protection on their part to finish the loan, and maybe, Jill, you can, address that at all if I'm misrepresenting the situation, but they obviously want the mortgage holder's right to have that transferred to them if there would be some kind of default, or, that they would acquire the property back, that they have a right to that license. This 180 days makes a lot of sense. If they had to dig the tanks up in the wintertime, they couldn't probably do all the work that would be necessary to restore the site to its condition that we might require during those winter months. So it might take a period of time to do that, and that's why it seems to make common sense that asking for some additional time if they had to do that to make that timeline just more practical.
Right.
And then the term to 26 years, I think, had to do with the length of the financing.
Right.
And,
Well, and to me, there's a couple of considerations that I take into play for this. One of that is one, the city's right to use the right of way. Are we going to lose, or is this going to is any language like this going to actually infringe upon the city's ability to use that right of way? And I don't believe it does. If you guys think otherwise, then I would love to hear that perspective.
Well, can't Chris answer that?
He certainly could. I would hope that he helped in the drafting of the language. So,
but I think that's a protection that we still need to have in place, is that if for some reason that we needed that right of way back during that period, that we would have the right to take that action.
Mhm.
And
and these don't change that. They just
well, the first one, the section 1J, where no other reasonable alternative can be accommodated, is the language that I think Chris has probably added to, clarify that and maybe give some level of comfort to the owner and to the lender that, we wouldn't just come in or some future council wouldn't just come in and say, well, we want that back, and, you're gone. That there has to be some
Yeah.
reasonable alternative. And Chris maybe can help spell that out a little bit clearer, but I think we have a public responsibility, because it's public lands, to make sure that if we need that for some purpose, that we don't.
That we have access
that we
to it.
don't have, that we can actually acquire it and have the tanks moved or whatever
Right.
to accommodate.
Chris, do you have anything to say about that, about the language itself?
Not really. I mean, the language is still allows the city to use its right-of-way. The language that talks about and no other reasonable alternative can be accommodated. I mean, it fundamentally comes down to that if you need to use the right-of-way and you have to make a determination that you need to use the right-of-way for whatever purpose that you have, one of the parts of this you have to look at is whether or not there's a reasonable alternative to what you want to do. But if what is being done here, in your judgment, interferes with your use of the right-of-way, we have the right to use the right-of-way. The main policy issue here is, the extension of the length of this to 26 years and whether or not that's going to be acceptable. Obviously, these tanks have been where they are for some time. And then the issue about the lender, I didn't have any problem with the issue about the lender. That's a reasonable request by a bank that's doing lending on something like this and wanting to step into the shoes of a party that perhaps forecloses, or they have to foreclose because of default by the party in ownership, the borrower. So that was certainly something that was, I thought was a reasonable change.
Okay. Thanks for that, Chris.
Hey, Buck, I remember you mentioned it last time you were here. We talked about when those were set and what the life expectancy was on those. But how does that, can you refresh my memory on what that was or what it is?
Well, there isn't a specific life expectancy since there used to be, but when they started using STIP coated tanks and protecting them with cathodic protection, then that extends, they don't know exactly how far, but that extends the life of the tank. And in my case, I have a impressed current system, and I have a gauge on the side of our building that we take readings from, and we report that stuff to NPCA. There's a lot of requirements from the PCA that all of us have to follow. Your other councilman knows that well too. So there is quite a bit of protection on the tanks anyway, and of course we have a leak detection system, as we all have to. But the impressed current is above the norm of what's expected, and it allows us to see right away if we're having a corrosion problem.
Sure.
So we would know.
Okay. Is there language, if there was a reason to replace the tanks, that they would no longer, that we would get that right away condition back then? Is there any language in there for that? I mean, I just, again, if it's, again, like you say, they could last for 50 more years, but if it's 20
Yes.
years from now,
There's language that says, notwithstanding the termination date, the license shall terminate upon destruction, demolition, replacement, or removal of the improvements.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that there was something from that last time.
There's that, plus just the economics of it
Sure,
will dictate without anybody having to say anything.
sure.
Mm.
Okay.
It won't happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Right.
No question.
Yeah.
Is this license assumable to another party other than just the mortgage holder?
With written,
It's-
If the new owner decides to sell in 2 or 3 years, do we have to go through a whole new license, or is this license can be transferable to another owner?
you can approve the transfer to
Okay.
another.
It has to come before the city to approve?
Yeah, the
Okay.
last paragraph
Yep.
is the language that relates to that. It says state that the city's approval and transfer of the license shall not be reasonably withheld.
That
So-
language is not in the draft that was sent around, so that's kind of a question that was left open.
Okay.
If you want that
it's
included,
not
you
in.
can. If you don't, it's not right now.
So then we have the option to, okay. But whether or not we add the language that's saying that it shall not be reasonably withheld, that's still the process that the license transfer has to go through.
Well,
Is that
there's
correct?
language in here that says that you have to approve the transfer of the license to a different party.
Right. So, I
They
mean,
just don't have a right to transfer it. And they're requesting that that be altered with the language that's in the memo.
got it. Does anybody else have any questions? Any other questions, further questions about this? So the two concerns that I had, one of them I feel like Chris addressed quite well, was whether or not the city would have the right to access and use the right-of-way. I feel like that is preserved by this license. And also the other concern I had, which Anton talked about, was the longevity of the tanks and whether or not the 26-year term has anything to do, will impact these particular tanks as they're in the ground, and the termination upon removal of the improvements. I think that addresses that pretty well. And if the tanks are still in good shape, then seems like they should just be left alone. As long as the business owner decides to continue providing fuel. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to consider about this? Otherwise, I do think that we're at a point where a motion would be in line, unless there are other accommodations that the council would like to propose or ask questions about.
So would the motion be to make these 4 itemized changes to the existing agreement we have made with Buck?
Yeah.
Or is it that plus the additional line about the transferal?
That's up
That's
to the
up to us.
motion. That's up to
Is
the
there any
motion.
reason that wasn't, headed out? And as Chris looked at that, I mean, Chris, is there any issue with that language, that last? I don't know if you have the same, you probably don't have the same memo in front of you.
He has talked through all
Okay.
those. So.
Okay, even the 5th one, if you want to call it that, right?
Mhm.
So what do you think, Chris?
I think that the not unreasonably withheld language is just unnecessary. So that's why it wasn't included.
Okay.
Is it something that I'm, horribly concerned about if you include it? No. I just didn't think it was necessary.
I would agree with Chris on that. Seems like that having city approval be the function, for the transfer of the license. That seems like that's the check and balance that is required for the transfer. So, yeah. So that's where I'm at. You guys have any other considerations or suggestions or thoughts or?
I'll make a motion to approve the 4.
Okay.
As we have written here.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I will second.
Motion and a second. Any final discussion on this? You sure this is the last time?
I hope so.
Okay, good.
Well,
Any-
of course it's not, because there won't be very long, and they'll be requesting that you transfer the license to an owner.
It's possible.
That's
yeah.
very possible. It's true. But I mean, as far as changing the license,
As far as
let's
Buck-
get the license
as far as
nailed
Buck
down.
having to show up.
Yeah,
Oh, there you go.
yeah, very good.
Good point.
Any other conversation, any other comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. All right, there you go.
Thank you.
Thanks,
luck.
Buck.
Congratulations,
Yeah,
yeah.
congrats.
It's a little early, but
Yeah.
Good luck.
We'll
Stick
yeah,
with good
you'll
luck.
get there. All right, so now, Mike, you can come up if you want, or you can just yell at us from the front row.
No.
No, they
I know, I'm just joking. All right, so we have a variance request from Mike here, who wants to develop 3 lots out of a chunk of land that he owns off of, if there's a map in here, 7.
There's a map right there, too.
Oh, look at that, hot dang. There it is. I was gonna say 7th Avenue East, which is the road that pops up there, the gravel road that pops up, and then County Road 7 that goes down. So we're looking at dividing into three parcels with a driveway and utility easement, so 2 of those can be developed for homes. Correct me if I go wrong on any of
You're
this,
good.
all right? And then there's also, like, one of the conversations that,
Yeah.
was it Hawkins, Commissioner Hawkins?
Let's let Tim talk about it. I mean, you can, but I mean.
Well, I was just trying to
You ran
introduce
the
it.
meeting, right?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
I don't care. You can keep going, but I know that Tim, I mean, you went through it.
Well, I'm intrigued about some of the conversation about the stormwater, wetlands, and other things like that, those
Yeah.
considerations. But
Me too.
we have this, this is one chunk of land, they're talking about breaking it into 3.
Yeah,
There
the
you
planning commission, received this, and it's a request to split that R1 residentially zoned parcel into 3 parcels, as it's shown on our survey drawing, not on the map on the wall. It abuts the Senty property on the rear, so Mike's home is the last home on the right side, right adjacent to the blue square.
Right side or left?
That one right there, the right,
That's,
on the right, well, on the right side of the homes there, yeah, the one that, so that upper one,
to the left
upper
of the
one
blue
is
line.
left of the blue line, up the upper corner, yep. So,
Just don't click.
so the Senty property, right now, it's 2 parcels, but, his home is on one, and then he owns this vacant parcel. We did have members of the public that did attend the public meeting. The neighbor to the east was in attendance. The neighbor to the south was also in attendance. The neighbor to the south expressed concerns about a driveway access, because that's the variance request, is to place a driveway along the east side of the property that would allow access to the front, middle, and rear parcels. And that's the variance request, is to allow lots to be created without a public street access. We've done this in the past, but obviously in unique situations, it's not something we would normally want to see. But so the neighbor across the street expressed concerns about the driveway being directly across from her house, and when cars were pulling out, shining lights, into her front window, increased traffic and dust and those kind of things. The neighbor to the east offered an option to that and suggested that possibly there could be an alternative to placing the property on the easterly 20-foot of the Senty property, to actually moving it over and putting it on to the adjacent parcel, if they could work out some agreement to do that. And I don't know if that's happened or if any of those conversations continued, but it was a very gracious offer by the neighbor in terms of possibly allowing something like that. Planning Commission felt that if that could be worked out, that would be a preferable alternative. But bottom line was the Planning Commission recommended approval of the request with the 20-foot easement on the east side of the existing parcel. So, again, Mike, I don't know if there's
I can
any,
update.
if there, it'd be helpful, because if there was any agreement made in the last 3 or 4 days, that would certainly be, something to understand.
I will continue.
Go ahead.
So the neighbor to the east, I talked with her about that, and, she was willing to grant an easement for access to the whole parcel on the east side. Mike, there's several things that play into this whole thing. One of them is that we have a purchase agreement on the lower lot, the southernmost lot. So that party, contacted them through the realtors, the buyer's realtor, that this is a possibility. There's obviously going to be, there will be some legal expenses, to create an easement and so forth. So those are all factors that played into, decisions and so forth. I've already got expenses into establishing the current easement, and, I don't want to, it doesn't pay for me to be able to solely, pay for a new set of easements. Irrespective of the cost of easements and so forth, the person who, the prospective buyer on the first lot is not interested in having the driveway be to the east. He'd be just as happy having it right up where it is right now. I don't care really, I just want to get the property sold. It doesn't bother me where it is. I did go to the property though and looked, I was, I'm concerned about the objection from across the way. And I went and I want to submit this actually to take a look at. I have two photos here, and I painted the sidewalk a little bit to mark where both the east property line is and where the 20-foot easement ends west of the east property line. So we have the east property line, and then we have an easement to the left. Mm-hmm. The contention from the neighbor across the street is that the driveway would be shining lights right into her living room, and I think that's a moot point. So I think the photos will illustrate that. So
Certainly pass them around, yeah.
here you go. That's, they're marked with two spots. One of them is west property line, and then the other one is the east side of west easement line, east property line. And that's what you're looking at when you look across there. So I think the photos will illustrate that it's really a moot point. So I would like to be able to continue with it as originally proposed, where the easement is on the east side of our property. Mm-hmm. However, at the same time, I'm willing to cooperate with the neighbor to the east should she decide to develop her property. And I believe that if what she has to do, she would have to have a wider road than what we're proposing. I don't know, maybe you know that, Mike.
That was part of the conversation at the Planning Commission, where at first it seemed like a good idea to share this easement with the neighbors. But when you consider Stacy's questions about why this was different than previous full-on platted subdivisions, it has to do with the number of lots that are being served by this driveway. And if we're looking at the neighbor's property as well, suddenly there's 6 or 8 potential lots that are being served by this driveway, and then the scale doesn't make sense anymore. And it really ought to be looked at a full plat level to figure out issues like drainage and access and how big the road ought to be. So this deal now doesn't really offer the neighbor any assurances that she'll be able to use that easement on her property for her purposes anyhow.
I think really I would like to propose that, we look at each of those as two separate issues. The potential issue of development of the property to the east of us is a future item that we have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
There's potential for cooperation between us and our neighbor to the east. Really, the issue is, I believe right now, is what we want to do.
Mm-hmm. And at the end of the conversation at the Planning Commission, it was obvious that we didn't have any ability to deal with an easement potentially on a neighbor's property. Right. We had before us a request for a variance to allow a 20-foot easement on this property, and that in fact is what the Planning Commission recommended after the discussion.
Right.
I have a couple questions, I guess, as far as, so you're gonna keep, I guess, have you talked to Mike and Tom about how, like, the build out of the infrastructure side of it with sewer and tying in and what size everything is? Because
we've worked with Thorson's on that stuff, and I understand that we have to have two separate sewer and water lines coming from the road up to each parcel.
Okay,
That's what I understand.
okay. Yeah, and that's, I guess, what I was trying to think. I mean, it sounded like, at least in reading the review from the planning commission, that you were planning on keeping the one that's adjacent right behind your place there,
Yeah,
the most
yeah.
northerlymost.
Yeah.
But it could be foreseeable, maybe not you, but sometime in the future, that could also be sold or separated. Does that change anything in the, because now with that driveway easement running all the way through this middle property, that is in theory connected by a driveway, so what would happen as far as I guess, just thinking water, sewer, and how that works, because now if you have three residences all servicing off a 20-foot wide road, maybe that's fine, but just thinking of the feasibility of running, how that gets, I mean, I'm not the person to probably answer that question, but just thinking about what the service line availability was, if you're trying to run something up from the first lot to the second lot, instead of running redundant lines, running larger line, or, what the story is, or does it not matter because it's all,
When we're talking about, 2 or 3 houses on that piece of property, then I don't think you need to have one main that's servicing everything. I think they can all be separated, and because all we're really talking about is one house now, and then maybe one later, and maybe one later. So they don't have to really know how they're going to hook them up yet. This easement would allow that to occur. So this driveway and utility easement is designed to serve both the middle and the upper lots.
sure.
With access to the road. And all the service lines that would be in that easement would be privately owned and maintained.
Okay. I think it's great that you're doing some infill. I think that's great. It's nice to see more lots in town.
Does anybody else have any other considerations for this? Any thoughts or concerns? It does seem to me like you've put a lot of thought into the best way to do this and the easiest way to do this. And I appreciate that you went out and took some photos of this. I understand wholeheartedly that I don't know if this will address your neighbors' concerns completely until things have been developed. But it's as long as you understand what that concern is and you're sensitive to it, I don't see this being a massive problem. So
There was also questions that was brought up about about wetlands and runoff and stuff like that.
That was a concern that I had as well.
Yeah, is it Tim Nelson, is it? From the county, went up and looked for, there was potential wetland areas that they looked for, and he.
So did you get this property delineated then, wetland delineation? No?
There was a drawing that I saw with potential wetlands, and then,
Okay.
he went up there, and it's fine. We don't have issues with
Oh.
wetlands.
That's not a delineation. That's an opinion by the county's wetland specialist that one is not required.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Well, that's
amazing.
That's a professional opinion.
That's all we would do. And we don't actually regulate that. The county regulates all those rules on our behalf.
And then in terms of runoff and so forth, I mean, it was brought up. What is it? What's the gravel road that goes up? That's 5th or 6th or something.
7th.
7th. Okay.
West of you there.
Yeah, I live on it or next to it. So I can never remember what it is. On the where County Road 7 and and 7th Avenue meet on that northwest corner. That lot there is very, very wet. There's lots of it. Always runs over the sidewalk.
Right.
I think that was a concern that the same thing would develop on this piece of property here, and I don't see that as happening at all. I've been through there several times at wet times in spring and so forth, and I think what's happening down on on this other corner is totally different than what's on this property. I don't think there'll be any issues with runoff.
Do we have, in this variance process, do we have any requirements for stormwater and and wastewater. That's largely because of the number of lots that are being developed, correct?
Well, it's also due to just the lack of controls we have in place to deal with stormwater as an issue. We don't have a stormwater ordinance. We don't have any stormwater requirements. When we talk about a plat that ends up with significant new streets, then we'll often want to examine how the stormwater is going to be handled and ensure that it's been designed by an engineer. But when we're talking about a driveway like this, we don't ever really get into it. So, you know, if the city ever did want to have a stormwater ordinance, I'm not even sure if this is the level that we would approach it at. When the county developed their stormwater ordinance, we worked with them on it and found that most of the times the level that they are approaching it at is not the level that development occurs in the city. So if they have a permit where maybe a couple of acres is going to be disturbed or a road's going to be a couple 100 feet long, and we have a permit where somebody's going to build a 2-car garage, and it's just not the same. And on property that's already been developed a long time ago. So it's just these rare circumstances like this.
And I want to add one thing. I mean, there's one, you know, when I was up there with Thorson's, there's one area where we figured we're going to put a culvert in. You know, there's I think there's 2 spots. It's kind of like east-west low spots, or I don't know, swales in the natural topography. And I know one of them we're putting a culvert in.
Okay.
So Mike, are you actually building the driveway out all the way to the top of the second lot?
No, we're going to.
That's 500 feet, so you're
Yeah.
just going to access that second lot?
We're just going to access the second lot at
Okay.
this point, but retain the right-of-way if we decide we want to do it,
Okay.
or if we want to continue farther north.
Any other thoughts or considerations for this? We have a prepared resolution in the packet, 2018-19. Minor adjustment on it, but
Look at the agenda. 1904 Senty variance.
oh, okay, 1904. Yeah, that's different. So then we have that resolution for variance. Unless somebody has some other reason to continue the conversation, I would entertain a motion to approve the variance.
I have one comment.
Ah, there we go.
Just a technical issue. Did you correct the title of the resolution?
Yep, we got it. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
And you got the legal as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have one other question. I know the Planning Commission mentioned that we have a maintenance agreement on the road. We do have that. To show it to you at some point. Is that what I should do? or-
Yep.
Okay.
Is that what you were going to bring up?
Well, I just have as we continue to sort of have some of these developed, and when I look there, this would be, I'll count it kind of as the third, maybe more, road that gets added in. 7th Avenue West was put in about 25 years ago, probably. Humphrey Circle has been added. So as we continue to add, I'm thinking of the new developments even over that we're doing now with the North Star housing. We have all these dirt roads going in. We are a city. I'm wondering, is there anything that we have or need to look at as far as how these are developed, who then maintains these roads, and do they at some point need to be dirt roads, or do they need to be converted over to asphalt? How does that process occur? And maybe that's a separate conversation from this, but
Well, let's split it into 2 separate issues. First of all, this one's not a road, right? There won't be a public maintained anything here. This will be a private driveway on a private easement. So we haven't generally required those to be anything but gravel, but we don't have any standards about what that needs to look like. So we don't have a driveway access code. We don't have a driveway construction code. So we don't even say how wide it needs to be. We generally make sure that when they're talking about the width that we think we can get our emergency vehicles on there, but we don't have any code that requires that when we're talking about an issue like this. Now, the next step up, if somebody's platting and building a public street, again, we don't have design standards other than that the road needs to be designed by a competent engineer. So if we did want to delve into the issue that you're describing, then we could use a right-of-way ordinance that gives us some guidance on street construction issues. The way it's happened now is, as these roads have developed, particularly these for smaller developments, they've generally been gravel, and our policy would be that we would leave them gravel until somebody made a petition for improvement, and if that happened, then you could consider making the improvement and special assessing the portion of that cost to the benefited property owners.
Is that,
I mean, that on the one hand makes these developers a little more willing to put housing in, which has been something that's been a priority for us. On the other hand, there's a cost in the future here that's going to be borne by somebody to deal with upgrading these roads. They're not going to stay gravel forever. But not this one.
Yeah, I think
It's just a
there's
driveway.
a distinction between a driveway that's on a 20-foot easement compared to a street right-of-way that's being used by, well,
Through
Seventh
traffic or-
Avenue, you know, where you have, 10 properties that are, or more maybe, that are using that for access.
and maybe that is something that we should take a look at in the future. I was intrigued by the conversation about the stormwater considerations, because we do have that great big stream, creek that rolls right through there. Obviously to the west, but all the hydrology in that area is linked to that stream.
Got
So-
one drawings linked to that.
Ditch, yeah, creek,
Ditch.
call it whatever you want. Yeah,
Sometimes it
place low place where water runs. So,
is. Okay.
yeah, does that address that? Maybe
Yeah,
that is something for us to continue conversation
I
about.
think at some point we need to, those things should be addressed as we move forward in the 21st century.
Wait, what?
I know, surprise!
So, with that said, we do have a resolution for the variance. Does anyone have any thoughts or considerations or anything like that for it?
I would make a motion to approve the resolution, and with the changes that were noted in the title and
Yeah.
resolution number, but also to add in there the requirement that the Planning Commission required a maintenance agreement. We talked about that, and even though we didn't see it, it would be forthcoming.
Okay. And that's something that you've alluded to, the fact that you would provide.
Yeah,
as
we
well.
have it.
So,
We'll have it by the end of the month, or maybe I have it right now. It's at the attorney's.
okay.
It's a protection to the property owners so that they
Yeah.
understand
Oh, yeah.
what the terms are of that driveway easement and, development, because if there's not a maintenance agreement, the conflict has a tendency to come back to the city, or, at least questions come back, and, it's not our easement, it's not our agreement, we don't have party to it, but it's important.
You're covered.
Yeah.
No,
right.
most lending institutions would require that.
Right.
So
Well, we have
pretty
a
Yeah.
motion. Do we have a second for that one? Anybody?
I'll second.
Second. Any further? I think that's an important point, though, that, this is something that is both a protection for the property owner and may also be a requirement, so that, I think that's important to have the Planning Commission on that. It might be the first steps of what we're talking about for having some kind of an understanding about stormwater and whatnot, so.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to is that, really, this is,
too, right?
it's an effort on the part of, the Sentys to make this lot available for development, because, we know that there's need for more housing availability in the city, and this is on city sewer and water, which, frankly, if you could figure out a way to make lots that are on city sewer water accessible and available, I think we'll all be benefit from that.
Cool. Any other conversation on this? Any other comments? Hearing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. All right. Wonderful. Thanks, Mike.
So should I, when I have a copy of the maintenance agreement, should I just give it to Mike?
Yep.
Okay.
And he'll hook it up with the planning and zoning. All right. Thanks, Mike. All right, Tom, you're up. So Tom has some information for us on fire hydrants. So we've got some maps. So, you want the clicker?
Yeah, I think we can see it pretty good. Where you got one?
All right.
Oh, yeah, we got one.
All
So
right.
without any further ado, I'll just let you launch into it because it seems like you've got your stuff pretty well organized here. A couple of things you want to talk about.
All right, I gave you a little quick, brief description of the water distribution system, starting with our tanks. You know, everything comes out of the lake. It pumps up to the middle reservoir. That would be consistent, and everything on the blue is our lower zone. It feeds off of that middle reservoir by the hospitals.
Okay.
From there, it was called our booster station. It pumps up to the high reservoir, which is up where you can see his logo, the Grand Marais water tower. It's the one with the moose on it. From there, the water comes all the way back down. The ones in the yellow is our high zone. It feeds directly off that tank. To get between, let's say, the yellow and the red, it has to go through pressure reducer stations. If we didn't have pressure reducer stations, we'd have 190-some pounds of pressure downtown.
Holy hell.
So you wouldn't be able to flush your toilets, you'd be blowing them all apart and that kind of stuff.
I dare you.
So, I mean, downtown you have really good water pressure. You can take a shower, you can defoliate, your back without rubbing it where it's good.
Yeah, that'd be super.
But it makes our, the distribution system a lot more complicated. We have places where you go from high to middle and actually high to low. We have different kind of pressure reducer stations all over town. So then, main thing here we were going to do about our fire hydrants. So we did an inventory, and we color coded them where they are in their different zones. And if you're ready to go through right now, we got about 144 fire hydrants. I've got in the proposal, working with the engineers, I picked areas along the Highway 61 corridor in certain zones where I would like to see more for better fire protection or more easier fire protection on the south side of Highway 61 and north side of Highway 61. One is located; those are the black ones, located by the North House, with all the expansion of the North House properties that the city owns and the dockside, and there is no really anything on the south side there, even at the campground. So to utilize that stuff, they're gonna have to draw out of the lake. I mean, they have the capability of drawing out of the lake, but this makes it a little more easier. Mm-hmm. The next one to the east is like across the street from the Dairy Queen. There's really nothing by that library right there. That's super handy for all those commercial zones there and the south side. So I wanted one there, and a couple other ones. The next one is up by the Holiday, where we had one, but we had to take it out because it was busted. We couldn't put it back in because it was solid rock structure. So when they do that, we're going to put one on right by the stoplights in that corner to feed all that commercial zone right there. And another one, next one will be on the north side of the road, over by the Mangy Moose area, just the big motel. We can kind of blanket both sides of the block there without having to access and tie up Highway 61 if we need to. There's a couple on the south side. So.
Okay.
Then now going to some other ones that are on there, we have two that are gray that are abandoned. They're still sticking there. One has a head missing, one is still there. They're abandoned because when they redid the extension of the Gunflint Trail, there was a bad line there anyway. It was a newer line, but it was, there was something wrong with it. It was leaking. And when they did the extension, they just kind of eliminated that. I mean, we can activate it if we have to. We have to open up valves in the middle of the road. So those aren't really even hydrants. They're just sitting there. They're lawn ornaments more. And as we get to it, eventually we'll take the heads off, the guts out, and cap them, and just stake them so they're there, but people won't drive by and look at them anyway. So
Hydrants hate to be looked at.
yeah, Then up in the BDA, there's that orange one. That's a newer one too, but it just somehow underneath there must be a fracture in the pipe down. It's in a creek and all that heavy rock, and it just started leaking. We don't know where it's leaking for sure. It's in the ground, so we can shut off the gate valve that feeds the hydrant, so we know it's between there and the hydrant or the hydrant itself. We haven't got to it. There hasn't been really a need to get to it. There's nothing there to protect. There's multiple ones in the area that can be used if need to. And let's say every one of those is the same water. You know, you can only draw so much off a hydrant, no matter if you have 5 trucks hooked to 5 hydrants. If it's one line, you can only get so much water out of it anyway.
So the process of replacing something like that, I mean, that's something you'd got to dig the whole darn thing up all the way down to the main, and then
Yes, down to the,
redo it.
it's that deep. You know, when you have your water main, you have a T that comes off your water main, then you have a hydrant lead.
Okay.
Goes level.
Okay.
The hydrant lead goes out to a valve. That's the gate valve to shut the hydrant off. And there's another short piece of pipe, which is like a same structure as a main, that ties onto the fire hydrant. So you got to go down like 8 feet, dig it up, and figure out why it's broken, replace it, or fix it. So, the one in the green is by the old mortuary funeral home. That line, it's probably hooked to a line that's 80 years old. It's a 4-inch old line. The lead is a 4-inch line. The hydrant works, but it leaks. It's an old leaded gasket, or packed leaded joint. So it was leaking, and just cut down on our I&I, or our unaccountable water, we have the gate valve off. If we need it, we can go turn it on. You just put a wrench down the hole and turn it, just like turning your water on and off. So we just chose to turn it off because there's enough other hydrants in the area to access any kind of fire protection or suppression that might need.
So do you have any plans to repair those? I mean, those other ones? It seems like, we've got pretty good coverage, and the 4 that are being added on Highway 61, those are ones that, they make sense to have those ones added as part of the project. We're talking about 2 out of 144.
Well, 142, one doesn't work, so it's still pretty good odds.
So how often are these tested, Tom, or how do you know that they work? What kind of schedule, what kind of procedure do you go through for testing?
We don't go open them, all the time. We don't have a regular flushing program. Our water quality here is so high, and I do extra tests. One's called the heterotrophic plate count, which tells me the condition of the water. It's made for like a bacteria count, but I use it more just for water conditioning. It's usually like negative, it's undetectable. So it's telling me there's nothing regrowth in the water, there's no sedimentation in the water, there's no buildup of anything in the water that's going to cause issues. What we do is open some dead end lines because they don't flow and the water can get stagnant periodically. If we get maybe some complaints in those areas, we can go open them up. When we do open up a hydrant to fix it or flush a line, you notice that the water clears up really fast. You got stagnation in the barrel or the hydrant lead. It blows a little rust off and it comes out, but it cleans up real fast. It's running good. So since I've been here, we've really never had a flushing program. There really hasn't been a high need for it because of the dynamics of the town and the pressure reducer stations. It's not just a simple task. I mean, we can do it. You need a plan for it. There's and if it comes to that, we'd have to have help to do it. We don't have enough staff to do that kind of stuff. Anyway, as we stand, we can't run around and open every hydrant and flush lines on that kind of schedule.
So I want to have you put on your former firefighter hat then.
Yep.
How do you feel about that? Do you think that if, no matter where they went, everything would work, it would be okay? What comes flowing through the
Yep.
lines, the trucks, the pumps, all that? Or
Yep, I'm confident that every hydrant will open and give you water. Sometimes they might not close and seal tight, and that's just because sometimes the gaskets might stick, and then you just have to tear out the guts and do that. And that's what we have done in the past. What we have trouble with, and where we've run into a lot of our trouble, is unauthorized use. People just go use a hydrant without ever asking. You know, some might ask after, some just take water. You know, we've had to chase down and, you know, people that have, like, they're just like theft, stealing water. We have those issues. We've had unreported use. You know, even if the fire department uses a hydrant, you know, they need to let us know. Or if anybody, you know, that's why we, even our own street department, we have certain hydrants picked that they can use. Because then we can go check them and make sure that it's still operating correctly. That leads to another big thing is a lot of people, when they use a hydrant, they don't operate it correctly. There's a process and a way to do it. And we've coached them many times at the fire, you know, department crew how to do it, and it's still always not done right. So, and if we know if they used a hydrant, you know, we can go check it. Like 2 years ago, we know a bunch were used, and what happens is if they don't get it sealed and tight right, it leaks. Like 2 years ago, we had like 5 of them that froze and broke because somebody had used it and not reported it. This year, we had a couple that were hit that we knew were hit because they were knocked right off their base. We have them that are hit and not reported they are hit, and you don't even know if they're damaged, you know, until something happens. They usually can work, but they might leak when they work, and then you got to repair them. The 2 that we did fix, it was $6,000 to fix those 2 hydrants. So it, you know, it's time and money. Fire protection, I'm 100% confident is not compromised anywhere in the city. So that's why we kind of manage it how we do. So.
And that's my big, was my big question, because I wouldn't want it to come back that we let things go, and when people really need the service, they couldn't get what they needed in the time they needed.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was there 20 years. I've seen some things that in town and out of town.
So that might be something, I mean, for us to discuss with the, I mean, the fire department just approved this great, big, thick, wonderful manual. And I didn't even read through that to see if that had.
Well, the other,
for
you got to think about
operation
it though.
of-
The other thing is if you do something once or twice a year, that's once or twice a year.
Right.
Most of us aren't going to retain a lot of things or remember the finer points.
Well, I'm just saying that they need to tell the water guys if they use a hydrant.
They're
Yeah.
pretty good. And then, like if it's during the day, we're all here anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the last 2 calls in town, I beat the fire truck there. I opened the valve, flushed the hydrant, so when they were there, they just had to hook up.
That's handy.
Yeah, I mean, plus I was the fire department guy for 20 years, so we work together as much as we can. And sometimes, you know, your times cross. It doesn't always mesh how you can manage your time together. So.
Okay. So do you have a schedule or a concept for replacing or working on those 2 that?
Like
that
the
don't
orange
work,
one,
or-
no. If anybody buys a bunch of lots and builds buildings, we'll direct time and resources
Great.
and get that one done. The one in the green, yeah, it's an 80-year-old pipe. I think it's like a sponge. I think it seeps where we can't tell if it leaks. You can't pinpoint leaks. We had trouble with the sewer at the lower end, but currently the road surface is not that bad. You know, plus we're spending a lot of other energy and resources on other upcoming projects, so it's not time slated, you know, to be replaced. It needs to be replaced, but
But that's one that you said you can use it. It
we can
be
use it,
turned
yeah.
on. So it's not like it's dead.
You know,
Okay.
Does
And-
have that tag on it, though.
it's got the tag on it.
Just
But actually,
one,
that's
yeah.
even good for the fire hydrant or the firemen. If they know that one's there, then they can try and get a hold of us if it's after hours, you know, and open it up. So, but in the meantime, they've got lots of feet of hose. They can go and hook on the next one down the block. So. The one green one is a little more tricky, but when we get the new black one in on you know, that covers that whole area even way better than what it is now. So.
And so largely for presenting this information. You just wanted to get us all up to speed about where we're at.
Yep.
Because we asked about it.
Correct, you guys made an inquiry, and Mike asked me to draw it up, and me and Hayden sat together, and we made the map, and Patrick finished some of the legend, and
It's good. It's a good team.
yeah, it is a good team.
Does anybody have any questions about the information that he presents, or the any of the hydrants or distribution system that we have? If we don't, then I think that's great.
Good, thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Tom.
All right, moving right along. So the next thing on the agenda is the Marais Business Coalition. They have a number of ideas and concepts to bring forward, and I think that they're all pretty self-explanatory, and you look at them on the memo here. But I'll let you take care of it from there. So go for it, Jim.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jim Boyd. I'm the Executive Director of the Cook County Chamber of Commerce. I'm here representing a group called the Marais Business Coalition, which has probably 30 to 40 active members. But my emails explaining all of this go to about 130 different addresses around everybody, and every business I know of in town gets them. So to the extent I can, I've vetted these proposals pretty thoroughly with the downtown business community and sought feedback. Got a lot of the folks here with me who have worked on these proposals. We started this several months ago in an effort to prepare properly for the Highway 61 reconstruction, actually. But Beth Kennedy made the point that if we're going to be looking at this 2-year period of construction, why don't we look decades out and make some changes that will work for the long term? So we've kind of had that eye. I've inquired in many of the pieces of the parking ordinance that require, or that we recommend changing, have been on the book since at least 1977. And I wanted to say that I come with these proposals recognizing that they're the start of a process that you will need to go through and talk to a larger community about whether they agree that these kinds of changes should be made. Briefly, well, you see the pages from the ordinance there, but it's not laid out in the best, easiest way to understand. Our first point is that you should know that everything from Highway 61 to the harbor and Java Moose to Broadway is a restricted time parking area now, 90 minutes, although there are very few signs that tell people that they're 90 minutes, and it's generally not observed. Our recommendation is that increase from 90 minutes to 2 hours.
And so basically all of the additional language that you've added here, 4 or 5 on here,
Yeah.
and the different
Yeah.
underlined
It's
elements, that's all basically just extending
the area,
that entire area.
extending the area to 5th Avenue West on Highway 61 and up a half a block from Highway 61 on 3rd it's on 3rd Avenue and 5th Avenue. 2nd and 4th, 4th is residential, 2nd is the library. There's no real parking there anyway. So we recommend that it be extended to those that it go from 90 minutes to 2 hours, that it be signed with a density of 2 signs per block. The big question will be enforcement, and our view on that is, let's see what the signs do. And we would propose that the merchants develop a polite little notice that they could put on the windshields of cars that are very obviously violating the 2-hour limit. We propose
for the construction period, but possibly for further on out, developing satellite parking. And we would like your assent to develop a plan to use, at least during the construction period, or as far out beyond that, as you have no use for the land, the Tom Tabota property in front of the new maintenance buildings. We don't have a plan for that. We'd like to do a satellite parking area there. But we don't know what it would entail in terms of what you would require for liability, for all kinds of requirements that you might put on us, and whether it's even available. You might have plans for that a year down the road that we're just not aware of. So we want to say we would like to talk with you about using that and learn what requirements you would put on us and see if we could move forward to reach an agreement there. We also propose, and this doesn't require your action, but it emphasizes what we're looking at, of developing an ethic of business owners downtown encouraging their employees to park away from the front of their businesses, to reserve as much parking as we can for people who are using the businesses, whether they're residents of town or the county or visitors. They're patrons rather than employees. One proposal that we haven't flushed out, but we may come back to you with, is a request that you consider reserving the line of parking slots on the west side of the block here, right up against the fence right up against Broadway, and possibly the line on the south side of the lot next to City Hall here for downtown worker parking, and get those cars off the streets and out of the fronts of business and into those less desirable parking spots.
So did we ever address what's currently happening with the parking lot over here? That hasn't happened yet. Somebody suggested, and I brought it forward, that we move, and the people that travel to Grand Portage by bus right now park down here in this lot. The recommendation or suggestion was that could they move up to the county parking lot on Fifth Avenue West and use that and open this up, which would then maybe make it available, or we could put signs and reserve so many spots over in that lot for people working in the downtown business district, and then open the rest up for just public parking.
That is kind of, we would propose to talk to Grand Portage about that and ask them if they can,
Actually, I brought it up at our joint meeting.
The
So-
county was open to that.
Yeah. So I guess that needs to go back to our next joint meeting again to say, well,
But we
They're
also addressed that on the
voting
second
on
page
that.
here, under the city parking lot. Both this one and that one are called the city parking lot.
I'm
And-
sorry, which one, Jim, when you said this one?
The one to
Oh,
the
right
south,
here.
City Hall, and this one, they're together jointly called the city parking lot. D on that second page is seasonal parking limit from June 1st of each year until the following November 1st. No person shall park any vehicle on Block 31 and Block 46 for more than 2 hours, except in
That's where
spaces
those are.
designated for employee parking.
As I'm reading this last night, I'm going, where are those?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So that's kind of addressed there. A couple of other things I would point out. Our goal wasn't to clean up this ordinance completely, because there's a lot of stuff that's out of date. But I would point out one I crossed through, Post Office Corner. That's not
You
the post.
you just went for that one.
That's
Yeah.
not the post office
Go
we
for
talk about. That's the post office where the old pharmacy was. So it's that needs to come out.
You mean
But the
where
next
Linda and I
one,
went and got our mail?
yeah, you did. I right. Yeah. No, Grand Marais was just a gleam in my eye at that time. The next one, parking with the motor running. We had some comments. This wasn't one that we had wanted to address, but in the feedback, we got some comments from folks who said, you should really enforce that. It's a city ordinance that you can't park trucks and run their motors for more than 20 minutes. And it happens a lot on the lot next to Como. And there are people there, Mangy Moose folks in particular said, we really don't like that. So can you enforce that?
The
And-
sheriff would enforce that if people would call him and report it. It's happened pretty regularly.
Oh, great. I will put that message out, that you call the sheriff's office and report that, and that it will be enforced. That's great. The others are pretty self-explanatory. The other thing that we wanted to do was to encourage and sign for RV parking, encourage it in the,
Coast Guard Point, Artist Point.
senior moment, Artist Point parking lot, yeah. And if we can develop
No.
something with you folks on the Tom Tabota lot, possibly there as well. And also, there are a couple of places where RV parking is really unobjectionable. One is, I think, on the south side of 61, along the lot that I call the agricultural products lot, that Buck's, where he has all the bags of stuff. If they park there on that south side, that's terrific. And there's also the east side of Broadway here. There are RVs parked there all the time, and they don't cause a problem at all. So we recommended that you put some language in that try to direct RVs and trucks pulling boat trailers to Artist Point parking lot, or the Tom Tabota or the Tom Tabota if we can work out an agreement there. Yeah.
So,
Any questions?
so so there's four things here. All of these things are, they would basically be changes to our parking ordinance. It seems to me that the process to follow for this would be to have the Planning and Zoning Commission take a look at this, right? Or is this something that we don't need to have them?
So isn't this one of our ordinances?
Yeah.
I'm not sure they would have to be the group that did the review.
Okay,
I think you could have a discussion here. You could receive input here.
good.
I do have a couple questions, Jim, because I want to understand. In the parking limits you're talking about on 3rd Avenue West north of Highway 61 and 5th Avenue West north of Highway 61 to the first alley. Where's the alley on 3rd Avenue West? That's above Voyager Brewing, right? I live on
Yeah.
that street and I'm thinking there's no alley.
Yeah, I adopted that language from the existing ordinance, and it applies on some blocks where there are no alleys either.
Okay.
There may be a good way, a good substitute, like the first 100 yards or
100
whatever.
feet, probably.
Huh?
Probably the first 100 feet.
Yeah, 100 feet, or whatever
Okay.
it is, yeah.
Okay.
No, I just used that because that was what was used in the existing ordinance, even though there was no alley that I could discern. So I just picked up that language. Yeah. And by the way, on First Avenue West, the existing ordinance has a 90-minute time limit to the first alley, which is actually the driveway to the back to Virginia Palmer's, to her parking lot. That specifies the first to the alley, but there's no sign there whatsoever, and so there's never been a 90-minute limit that's observed, and there's no 10-minute limit on the opposite side either. Thank goodness.
I didn't know there was a 90-minute limit, but then I live here, so I don't read the signs.
Yeah, you're,
I don't
So-
think it really matters whether you live here.
Well, I'm just saying, there's a lot
Well,
of
that-
things I don't do.
That is the test. I know. I know. Mike thinks people don't read the signs, and some others do as well.
well, I mean, I think that really the crux of the issue is that if we're going to even consider something like this, what's the enforcement mechanism? I mean, if you don't have any enforcement, there hasn't been a parking ticket issued downtown, and I mean,
A while.
yeah,
Probably 30
while.
years, right?
I say
no,
Jim or
not that long,
Stanley.
but-
maybe when the city
One of them
maybe
did.
when the city of the police department, I don't know.
No, the sheriff would for a while. There's some complications with that. Right now, if you're going to give a parking ticket, you have to use the uniform traffic citation to do that, which is kind of expensive.
Pretty pricey.
And
a lot of the
not
money
a
goes
very
somewhere
high
else.
priority for law enforcement issues in terms of traffic violations.
Yeah, so that gets at the issue. How would we go about establishing an enforcement program if you're going to have 2-hour time limits, or if you have 90-minute time limits that you don't enforce, what's the value to that? If you have signs up, nobody even pays any attention to them. If they're
Well,
do we-
if we
what do we
hire
do?
somebody part-time,
Well, you
We've got
know,
some steps in between here and there, so assuming
When
you're
I
not gonna
retire-
ask the sheriff's office to try and help with this issue, and you wanna deal with it on an administrative level, there is a process that the state allows cities to go through to create administrative tickets. It's not a simple thing to do, but you can do that. And then we're talking about more like a $60 parking ticket. Part of that is you have to set up a local third-party review to someone who might take issue with the administrative ticket. So it's kind of complicated, and let's say you've got that in place, you still have to figure out how are you going to determine who's been parking where for how long. So
and there's a recent, as Patrick pointed out, appeals court decision, judgment that marking tires with chalk isn't allowed now. That's a reasonable search, apparently.
well, then to me, and this may be a moot point and nothing against your suggestions, but if we have no way of enforcing it, why make the rules?
Well, but where that leaves you, with respect, is that you're going to repeal what you've got, because it's on the books. There is
Yeah,
a 90-minute
no,
limit now.
I know.
And there are only 6 signs all of downtown, and they're grouped in a very small area.
Right.
So with respect, I think our suggestion is that you go incrementally, that you properly sign it. If you accept
Honestly, Jim, my question wasn't to you.
Oh, okay.
I wonder who it was too.
My question's right here. If we're going to put ordinances in place that we're not going to follow and we're not going to enforce, why would I want to spend my time doing it? It's a suggestion. And if it's very complicated for us to do these things, why are we going to work on them? Unless we decide this is what these things we want to work on and we want to find a way.
yeah,
But that's up to us. Again, that wasn't my point to you. That's a question before us sitting here.
and
is-
don't take my point that it's complicated. I don't want you to do it. We can do it
No.
if you want it done.
I know.
It might be in our best interest to use some of this summer's downtown activity, and whether we take action on this or not, to just simply put somebody out there or have people take note of how many vehicles a day, do not meet these criteria.
Well,
It would be interesting to me to see that.
I love that you guys have worked on this, and I want to say thank you to those of you here that have worked on it. And my point wasn't to you or to pick on your group at all. I think that we've talked before, and it's one of our top things, we've got lots of things in place from the 1970s that need to step up. And I like that we have your input, because it's the people who are working down here, seeing what's happening, whose businesses are affected. The one piece that I see missing that I think we have to, as a council, look at and work on is some of our handicap parking, because we have a lot of people who have disabilities, and we have very few spots, short of blue paint, that mark them off, and we don't even do very much to people that are parked in handicap spots in this town that shouldn't be. So, but I think it is something that we have to look at. Again, we go back to that enforcement piece, and that's the point where we all kind of get that hang up of, oh, it's going to be a little hard, what do we do? Well, I think we need to figure that piece out as a council, because we are in the 21st century, and yeah, this is Grand Marais, it's small town Grand Marais, but we've kind of gone beyond that with the borders that we've opened up and being America's coolest small town and inviting everybody to come here. Tourism's wonderful, but there's people that live here too, so we've got to find that balance. And I want to be able to see people that live here come downtown and shop if they so choose in July, and find a spot to park or maybe have a chance, as well as our handicapped and disabled people. So I think these are great suggestions, and I'm glad that you guys took a look at it.
Can I just say one of the things that made this especially important is because we had a survey that figured out how many spots we were going to be losing with this construction. So we're going to have a couple of years of very serious lack of flow, and that's a big issue for us economically. And so, we're just those next 2 years are very important, but looking at the future, we have a problem without construction, so we need to look, but we have 2 years to work on it, and then see what
Or
we can
more.
go for the, well,
Now that it's
Right.
overbid.
right.
Well, and the philosophy that the group consensus was, by the way, there was a fair amount of talk about handicap. I think there are 4 spaces, is that right? But there wasn't a consensus on adding more, because the feeling was that a lot of times that they sit vacant almost all day long. And so why add more? Why take spaces away?
Well, and a lot of that, I think I think my point would be that we should observe these things and then actually acknowledge what our needs and what our where we're meeting the needs and where we're not. If we do have vacant handicap spots, then one would say that either we're meeting that need, or maybe
They're in
that
the wrong place.
maybe they're in the wrong spot.
Well, Mr. Mayor, that was kind of the attitude that this group took as far as enforcement was concerned. Was we really don't know how well people would respect a properly signed time limit, and so let's do that first. And don't make the perfect enemy of the good. Of course, there are going to be some people who exceed 2 hours.
Right.
But it's also very possible that most people might obey it,
Right.
or a lot of people. And so that would define the size of the enforcement issue. So let's ramp up. Let's see what the signs do. And if they don't do anything, and then you want to go to the next step, then you can start to talk about how you do enforcement.
Was there any discussion of, and not that we have a lot of valuable, or a lot of open street space, but of having like a few spots that are 10 or 15-minute parking? So I need to run to the bank and get a deposit in. I only want a spot for 10 minutes, hopefully, if I can't get in, or I want to run into a store and get a birthday card for somebody. Was there any discussion about that, or how people feel about
No,
that?
we didn't do that. We didn't, nobody suggested those
Okay.
smaller time limits, so, yeah. But I suspect that you will get some of that if you engage in the process of changing the ordinance, which is fairly laborious, and engages the larger community, which you should. I mean, this is the downtown business folks speaking, and that's not the whole community, so you'll have to hear from them. And they might want those things.
I have a question for Chris. We're tapping him a lot tonight. A question about the idea of having the downtown business people, potentially put like a flyer or something on the windshield of a vehicle that has exceeded the 2-hour time limit for the downtown area. Is there trouble with that? I mean, that strikes me as that's not. It's like you're not searching in their vehicle like the chalking of the tires would be, but I wonder if there's any, like, is that a dangerous thing to be doing in a litigious society, I guess?
If you have, so if a private group, so this is not the city doing this, right? This is
Private group,
the
yeah.
business owners, yeah.
private group doing it. And so if the private group wanted to put together a flyer that articulates what the parking requirements are in a certain area and go around and put flyers on people's windshields, unless we've got some sort of solicitors or peddlers type of requirement or something like that where they need to register with the city or do something like that, there isn't anything that would prohibit that, and it would be the groups. It's their flyer, so it's not something that the city per se would be doing.
Okay, so that wouldn't be objectionable to that that ruling on the chalking of tires or whatever?
That's
No, and you should keep in mind that the chalking of tires ruling was in a jurisdiction that doesn't have any legal authority in our jurisdiction.
Okay.
So whether or not the chalking of tires thing plays out elsewhere in this country, we'll see how that goes. It might, and certainly law enforcement needs to potentially consider the ramifications of chalking tires. But as it stands right now, it's not applicable in the state of Minnesota. So, but it might be, could be at some point.
Okay, fair enough.
I should be clear, we were talking about a notice that would say something like, welcome to Grand Marais, we're glad you're here, please help us make this experience as pleasant as we can for everyone by honoring our 2-hour time limit, or something like that. Not, hey, you stupid so-and-so, get out of here.
I get that, I get that.
That's the third, the one you put on the windshield.
Yeah, that's progression, right? It's a progression.
That's safe for us special people.
Coupon on it, so they don't throw it away.
You get free taffy.
Free piece of fudge.
So
Maybe you don't want that person coming in and asking.
So the question is, how does the council want to move forward with these suggestions? It seems like this is, it's not likely that we're going to be able to hash this out and get a, good consideration on the parking here at this meeting. This is something that we could work on as a work session, or something we could take up at a future meeting. I'm wondering what the temperature is here for everyone.
Well, I think it was, great that the downtown business folks got together and started talking about this. I mean, parking has been an issue, for a long time for a lot of different reasons for different people, but that you've come with an idea and a concept that you think might help address some of the parking issues that are relevant to the downtown business community I think it's a good step forward. We know our ordinance is antiquated. We know that there's not enforcement happening. So I think the question is, what's our willingness to get into this and try to figure out a way that creates an effective process for parking in downtown streets. I think the first step would be to have Chris take a look at the information that was put together and just kind of give us some rough ideas. Is this a direction that we could take? And if we have other ideas ourselves, then that might be a starting point to.
Well, and I'd like to, to me, this is kind of the second one that's brought forward. Now, as we talked about, number one, we wanted to look at our ordinances and zoning. The first thing that was really brought up and that's been on our list that we're trying to address now is the camping, or the trailer issue. This would be another one, and I don't want to say who's one or who's two, but this is the second one to be exposed. I'll use that language. So that kind of tells us, to me, the direction then as to where we should be moving towards. And calendar parking. Calendar parking and this really go good together. I think that's a session for us to sit down and look at it and start working through it. What's antiquated, what can we change, and take some of their direction to say this is what they feel is best. They're there every day. They know better than I do. Can we put this language in? Does it fit? Does it make sense?
I think that one of the, sorry,
No, go ahead.
one of the things that I think I think the idea of this effort with more signage, with wayfinding, having been all over the country in an RV, it's not easy to know where to park or where to park. But it is also, it's helpful when there's guidance to it. And I will say that even if we know that the enforcement side of that is something that we're working on as we work through agreement with the county and law enforcement on how that happens, that might happen in a dozen towns that I parked in. And I have no idea, but I'm like, oh, I've been there for 2 hours. I got to go move 3 blocks over or something, right? Like that. I feel like the general, like what Jim was saying, that idea of getting the signage out there, even as we work through, how are we expecting this to be enforced? I guess I'm saying it on, to thousands of people watching this right now. Well, no, that there's going to be some lag time, but I also think it's appropriate to be able to get the signage up there so that it isn't just signage is up, law enforcement, or the enforcement actions start today, right? That gives locals, right, people that have to deal with this idea every day, the time to understand it. But maybe it has the effect of actually regulating, which is the point, visitors and how long they park their cars. So I agree with work session with all this, but that, I guess, just jumping on what everybody said, that's kind of where I feel about the whole issue.
Right. Well, it's good to have your perspective on having driven a RV around like that.
Can I just
Yeah,
add
go
a
ahead,
point? My name's Ivy. And sitting on this group, I can appreciate the hugeness of changing all these ordinances. I think the intent of the group was really needed to start somewhere and be proactive because of the construction that's coming this way, and to be positive and be proactive that we've got a problem, we need to deal with it. So going down the enforcement tangle is kind of negative, but that's part of the ordinance. But to try and stay proactive and positive that because of the construction coming and these changes could down the road be positive for the community. And the enforcement thing can be progressive and working into it. And the thing that I've tried to stress before in some of these meetings is that we're changing behaviors. And there's three groups of people that were changing behaviors. It's the locals and the tourists and employees. So even though the city has to have these ordinances and things, we're really changing behaviors. And just to try and be proactive and positive, I guess.
Yeah, and to keep the goal in mind, right? Like the whole point of all of these changes in language is to accomplish a specific goal, and that goal is to make sure that the parking for downtown flows as best as it can, and that people don't just like literally park it there all day and then congest the downtown area with their vehicles for the entire day. And you know, I do think that it goes beyond signage. There has to be more than signage. I was glad to hear what Chris had to say about little flyers and whatnot that could be done to help educate people about what the time limits are for the parking that we currently have. And I would be interested in sitting down with the council as well, doing a work session on the parking the parking ordinance, so that we can kind of wrap our heads around the spaces that we're talking about. So like, this is basically the space you're talking about that would have the 2-hour parking limit, and that and then doing some research on what the best way to sign these things are, and all that sort of thing, because we do have pretty limited posts and things like that by design downtown for signage. So we need to figure out that we make sure that we don't overcrowd those signs, or those posts that we have for signage and whatnot. But I do think that this is, like what you're saying, makes a lot of sense. Being proactive about it, trying to think about this before we get to a point where we're going to be running into a shortage of parking due to Highway 61 construction. I think that this is the right time to be working on this.
It's already short now.
Well, it's already short time, but yeah, but it's better to
Getting
be
shorter.
working on it now than next year.
Meanwhile, we can all pray that they find an additional $6 million somewhere, and so all that hard work we've done over the last 3 years doesn't go
That's later on the
by the
agenda.
by.
Jim. That's later on the agenda. The doom and gloom.
Yeah.
Positive.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's where I think we should leave this, is at a work session with the council.
Can I ask, because the idea of you scheduling a work session anytime in the near future seems pretty ridiculous to me. What do you want to talk about? Like, are there questions you have about their proposal? Are there things you're not sure you want to support? Or do you want us to just get started on doing some research and come back with do a public presentation of what they're proposing and see what we get, and then just come back with a draft ordinance and a public hearing?
What? Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think the public feedback would be positive. I think getting the outreach is, one sure way to get public feedback is to put all the signs up exactly how these guys wrote it, and then we'll probably get a bunch of people that have feedback.
There would be feedback.
But then we might not have the right signs when we say like, oh yeah, actually that's a good idea we never thought of. So it seems like public engagement based off of some of this information that they brought forward. Obviously put time into it, and I think it's important to get some public feedback. We can have our own input. I agree with you on the work session idea. I think this is a really good jump start.
Yeah.
So
But I
Then
also think, like
we
what
could-
Kelly was saying, there's so many things that we've been talking about that seem to be all intertwined.
I think one of the strategies to help with that is let's not overcomplicate this. A lot of work's been done already. It'll be pretty complicated at a staff level because we'll have to go out there and figure out, all right, where are these signs going to actually exist? But that's not something you need to spend a lot of time thinking about. We've already been talking with the county about this as well. A couple of these streets are theirs. So we can get to work on that and probably come back in a month and do a parking ordinance and the calendar parking and these changes. They all live in the same document in the same home. We'll have, we've already done that process. That's really ready to be considered by you. So we'll do the similar process with these rules, come back in a month with a draft ordinance, and then you can consider it.
I like that idea, and I'd really like somehow, I don't know what anybody else thinks, but us to really look at that Fifth Avenue West corridor, especially at the bottom. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but I absolutely, to no one's fault, hate that intersection and that spot. There are cars everywhere, there are people walking everywhere, there's crosswalks, I know that we're never gonna have a stoplight there. That was, that's not part of the Highway 61 design, but, I would like us to really take a look at that. I don't want to take away from the businesses, but part of me almost wishes we could not have parking on the lower block of Fifth Avenue West. It's really, I'm just waiting for the day somebody dies there, and I'm going to dread it when it happens. But if there's something that we can come up with creatively, or anybody out there has creative ideas in that area, I would really like to take a look at that.
Well, the Highway 61 design makes significant changes to that intersection. I think that'll address a lot of what you're talking about.
There was no piece of 61 that was more discussed in that steering committee over the 3 years than
That
Fifth
spot.
Avenue
We're
West.
never gonna eliminate the congestions that's there. We
No.
talked about that on the planning commission years ago.
Right.
And now with the narrowing and taking away the turning lane, my opinion is make it worse.
There'll be a turning lane there.
Well, a turning lane to go up, but not a full-length turning lane that's there right now, is my point.
And even with the turning lane there, the stuff that I see happening there is, wow.
Out of normal bounds.
I think it will be, I see it happening too. I'm coming down and I can't see the pedestrian until they're, I think a lot of that will be changed with the bump outs and the parking changes, the yellow curb areas and things. I think it will be a lot better. Not good, but better.
And the drugstore situation.
And the drugstore.
Yeah,
Well, who
that's
could
gonna
predict
be-
that?
Yeah.
You should,
Can I don't want you to forget about the Tom Tabota lot. We're not talking about using it if you have a use for it, but we're just looking at overflow parking, and we're gonna, we've gotten an okay from the school to have
overflow parking there.
overflow parking there. So, we're not talking about, permanently there, if you're gonna put a building there or something else, but just, we need to have some other overflow.
Yeah, and for that, I think that we'd have to do some asking around probably to
Sure.
the public utilities, and also to talk about what the liability and legality of parking up there would be. I'm sure
Well,
it's-
of
it's
directing?
ours.
We don't need it.
Because right now, we wouldn't tow anybody out of there,
for
but if
what
we're
we're
going to direct
doing.
them there.
We don't need it. So the question of do we have a use for it is related to the next agenda item.
So the other place that we were looking at is the, where the old pool was. So that's another possibility. We're just looking for spots that the city has or that are available to put our overflow parking,
Yeah,
especially for North House there.
okay.
Well, and again, I think we have to, one of the things we could do is start working on the access of this lot across the street, and then pushing downtown employees to park in that lot.
We are talking some about a shuttle, and that's.
Would connect those, yeah,
But to keep
satellite
the traffic
areas.
moving, if we put people in different areas, we're gonna need to shuttle them into town. So.
Eric Humphrey, one other idea that was brought forth was talking with local businesses, say like the banks don't use their lots on Saturdays and Sundays, or at least Sundays, and arranging with one, not putting out generally public parking, but making arrangements with other businesses that do have high volume employee parking needs on specific days. So one thing that the city could help with was, staff. You have staff parking in a couple different spots, and maybe talking with an area business who could use that on a Saturday and Sunday would be one other idea in the work session to talk about, and the legality of that.
Well, can't we just put it out there? I mean, we don't patrol those or do anything. We don't use them Saturday or Sundays. Businesses can direct.
We do use them Saturdays and Sundays.
We
so
do.
Not all of them, but.
Or whatever is not used.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a lot, 3 or 4.
Anyway,
Because
that's
I
one
use them
other
on
idea.
Saturdays and Sundays as well.
Well, I think that there's a fair amount to unpack there. The reason I suggested a work session was because it seems like there's a lot to do here, and I didn't know if there's enough involved or enough present here in this proposal to be able to put together a draft ordinance, do something like that. If you guys feel confident that you can work on that and bring something back to us.
Yeah,
then-
this practically is a draft ordinance. It needs some fine tuning. It needs some just, field checking. And there's a lot more of that when it comes to the idea of signs everywhere, a lot of field checking. But in terms of the idea of taking this and going deep with it, I think makes more sense if we didn't have 20 things on the agenda right now. But Jim's comment earlier, though, it's not let perfect be the enemy of good. I think we can make some of these changes pretty quickly without going deep into the issue, and living with the consequences of that is probably a better outcome than trying to figure it out and not getting there because we're too busy.
Mike, could we possibly do some just painting, if the city just painted on the space itself, they don't have to put a sign up then. So there might be some spots, if you just paint it on the street, then it's easy to change if you need to.
I think we'll be happy to have that conversation with this group about creative ideas of doing it, particularly after we've gone out and tried to figure out where these signs are going to live, and maybe 2 per block's not going to work everywhere, and we're going to have to be creative.
We're happy to work with you and would enjoy the conversation.
Yeah. So does the council feel like that's the direction to go with this, to direct these guys to work on a draft ordinance on this and refining the...
I think so, and I
information
think I feel like there's a sense of timeliness to this too, because if we're going to talk about calendar parking, we need to get that taken care of by the end of summer, early fall, so that people can prepare for that. I think the timeliness for the Highway 61 downtown project, stuff is also important to make sure that we just don't let this, go dormant.
Right. Okay. So other than that, feel good about that? All right, so we'll move forward in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your work.
All right. And so for the calendar parking ordinance,
That's just on here just to make sure we don't forget to talk about it. It's ready for you to consider. It's just waiting for this issue, because let's just do one ordinance.
right.
If this issue is going to take 3 or 4 months, then we're going to separate them again and bring the calendar ordinance back and just get it done. We really need to have it in place in the next couple of months to make sure that we can prepare for the winter.
Right, totally. So we don't really have to talk
Nothing
about
else
that.
to talk
We're all
about.
still on the same page about calendar parking.
Yeah.
So. All right, so we're going to move on then. Moving on to the City Hall liquor store conversation. So we basically just have time in the meeting here to discuss what the next steps are. And we've got 2 basic strategies.
Can we save that for? I just want to go even back a step further and look at a couple of the slides from the presentation when the developer was here, just to go over some really high-level concepts. Because I don't want to give too much credence to this one page. It's a pretty sketchy idea, trying to just start a conversation. But there's some values that you established in your work session a while ago now that you wanted to try and accomplish with this property in particular. Now, this is both the downtown site and the Tom Tabota site, but remember, you wanted to get vitality here through high-intensity development and full utilization. So you remember when we looked at this site in particular, we thought there's a lot of extra room here that could be filled that might be able to add vitality. You wanted the pedestrian-oriented development. You want retail and other space that enhance the balance of downtown needs, so you're looking for uses like the liquor store, maybe like City Hall, but certainly like a lot of other retail things that are happening. And you were hoping for some efficient, environmentally friendly design. That's what you wanted to accomplish on this site. That's what we were hoping to see private development help us accomplish. That's going to be a much bigger challenge for us to accomplish if we try to do this site just by ourselves. Just wanted to revisit that concept again and make sure everybody remembers that. We may need to make some changes to that. What we said about the liquor store was we want to increase revenue and improve facilities. We can do that on this site, but obviously this site has some challenges. The liquor store will be successful anywhere. I think we all know that. It's easier to operate when it's in a big space all by itself, but maybe it doesn't provide as many benefits to the neighbors that way. And it certainly is our best chance to do what we said the downtown site's desired outcomes are, to leave it here. It's the only sure thing we've got in terms of vitality and retail and other spaces. So let's skip ahead now. This is the slide that the developer offered about what do we do here, possible paths going forward. They, first of all, suggested we could offer a lot more specific information about this site to a developer, which might, even if it's us that's going to have to do it, we'll probably have to do these things. It's possible that just by doing that investigative work, it might shake loose somebody else that wasn't interested because they didn't know enough. Through a letter of intent, then, we could work with this developer, just kind of to keep going on the process. The public approvals process here, I think, is probably a lot easier than what they're used to because we own the site and we're not going to allow them to propose anything that would require special permission. So that's probably pretty easy for us. Then they'd select a contractor, get all that other work done, and such, and construction begins. And they're saying 3 to 4 years is how long it would likely take for that to occur. So I think maybe there was a little bit of disappointment about the product and a little disappointment about the timeline, which is why we're looking at this next idea now. We could do it ourselves for our own uses. That was one of their ideas for us. Or we could engage in a public master planning process to determine public priorities for the site, something that they've done, something that we've seen other communities have done, something other developers have said. If you go through, they even had specific types of processes, that we could come up with a much clearer picture of what we wanted to see here and then go find someone to build it. We could reopen the RFP process. We actually have never actually closed it officially. I've probably had 3 or 4 conversations with either people that want to talk to potential developers or other potential developers after the RFP's been closed. I'm not expecting anything to come from that, but you never know. And we could look for alternate locations for municipal uses. That was their suggestions to us. Now, what we talked about last meeting, if we're going to do it ourselves, yeah, thanks, Patrick.
Oh, I don't have anything.
Oh, okay. Well, then let's just go back to the packet. If we're going to do it ourselves, there's some logistics that give people pause, and because they'd be tricky. Like, how do we do this on this site, redevelop this site, and not lose a season of liquor store revenues, which would be a big deal. And it certainly would be a season to demo that thing and build a new building and get it up and running again. So what could we do? Well, continuation of service is the first thing I try to address, and this is a 45-minute brainstorming and organization of ideas here, so go ahead and pick holes in it. It's just a conversation starter. But we can do temporary liquor store. We've done temporary library. I mentioned that at the last meeting. I could imagine we could do a pretty simple structure. It could be as simple as we get 4 refrigerator semi-trailers parked at the Tom Tabota lot, and some kind of other temporary structure that we bring in, construction trailer type or whatever, to be the retail front. And with a little bit of work and a little bit of money, it becomes a, maybe a classic style Grand Marais development of put together all the pieces of whatever's lying around. It could function. The nice thing about the liquor store is I think we've proven this with our existing structure. It doesn't have to be a really good design in order to be successful financially. So I just did some quick sketches myself. We could fit that in that parking area over there if we wanted to. We could demo City Hall side of this building and fit it right there for a while, and then demo this and build it. I mean, there's ways to stage all that, but probably the easiest thing would be to just go off the site for a while. And so we could go up to Tom Tabota and build temporary liquor store up there in some kind of cheap and easy way, while we completely then clean off this site and build a new building here. That probably easier is temporary City Hall. We've been finding that City Hall, the needs for space is shrinking as the way we do business is changing. We still have a pretty regular, if not busy, public access point that we would have to put somewhere else, but most of the other functions that we're doing here in terms of access to information electronically, taking phone calls, working on staff issues, we can do in any building. We could do it in the Public Works garage and set ourselves up in that office for a temporary period of time. Bring in some sort of, again, front construction trailer where we're going to staff that with a couple of people, and that's our public space. And then take our servers and our records and everything else and put them in the Public Works garage while we, again, tear this down, get out of here, rebuild on this site. So I think that particularly when we're working with our construction team that's adept at this, they'll be able to help us figure out how to actually do those things. But I'm not afraid of that issue. I think we can figure that out. So city as developer then, that's the simplest way to do this. We just build what we have here. We resize it for our current needs, but we just build City Hall and liquor store and what other of our other tenants we want to bring with us and want to come with us. So we get our team together. Be real simple to just call LHB and McGough and say, hey, that Public Works garage project went pretty well. Let's start another one. And we'll go through the space needs issues with LHB. They'll do a design for us. We'll go through a bid and build process like we did with the Public Works garage. I would recommend we just do the construction manager at risk again. We've got all the processes figured out for that. We've got the contracts figured out for that. We've got people we've worked with that we're happy with figured out. So that'd be the fastest way to go here. The cons, of course, is we don't create any new tax base or more vitality on this site or some of the things that we said that we wanted.
Can you go back to the one that showed what we wanted to get out of it? That's the one.
But what we can do is make it pedestrian oriented. We can ensure there's some retail here by keeping the liquor store and other office space that does generate traffic. The EDA generates traffic, AEOA generates traffic, we generate a little bit of traffic. It's not a lot, but it's better than we leave the site and we have nothing here. And that's even worse for that. So that's pretty safe, I think, path for us to move forward. That's certainly the fastest. We could easily be doing construction next year if we wanted to on that. Although that idea of how much is going to be happening in this town next year does scare me quite a bit. But then, let's just broaden it a little bit. What if we wanted to open it up a little bit more? I've always thought a path here is not find one out-of-town developer, but cobble together a team of local people that might be interested in private development. And I don't know if we're the right people to cobble together that team, so maybe we bring somebody in like the EDA, or maybe there's somebody else that becomes a partner like that. And they find investors who are willing to buy into a new building here, and we try to add a little more retail or a little more office. We certainly know some people that are interested in having that space. I don't know whether they want to be a part of that team, but I think that some group of locals would be much better positioned to assemble that than asking a developer from out of town to come in here and try to figure all that out. It's a big ask, and we've kind of found out that a lot of them aren't going to be interested. So it's very similar process, but the space needs is tougher because we don't know who's going to be a part of it, and there'd be a lot then of kind of chasing down potential business partners. That partnership is a lot more complicated legally, financially. Who's going to own this place? Are we going to rent from the EDA? Is some private entity going to be created through local partnerships that we're going to rent from? So that process is going to take a lot more time. It would certainly take another year at least, I think, to figure that out, and potentially a lot more. The pros, the EDA as a partner has access to different development tools than we do. We'd be adding some tax base here, which would be nice. We're trying to do a little bit more of what you said your goals were. The cons are kind of big, though. The EDA is a 1/2-time person right now who's way, way, way overworked. And, we don't have any in-house expertise on doing that at City Hall, so we're just not staffed for this. We'd have to find some additional resources to help with that. And then the financials are questionable. The developers have all kind of told us that unless you've got somebody who's really looking to park a lot of capital here to fund this with debt leaves a pretty big gap. So, they're saying it. We shouldn't assume that 6 local investors are going to be able to pull this off because the financials are still going to be questionable. So, does any of that excite you or scare you, or where do you want to go with this?
Well, I think, the RFP that we received, or the proposal we received, I think opened our eyes to, some of the limitations of this site, in terms of the economics that are necessary to make a project viable. I think a number of issues were raised about kind of the environmental issues that might be present here too, in terms of the ability to build on whatever base is down here, which we don't really know too much about. It leaves me, kind of disappointed that we didn't have some more firm proposals or concepts that might be viable. Obviously what we had didn't seem all that exciting to me, and I didn't sense that anybody else was all that excited about what we saw either in terms of finished product. I see that what our objectives here for both the downtown and Tom Tabota site are, and those are pretty idealistic. Be great to make this the most and that the most, have development that could occur on both sites that would be fit those outcomes. But I'm thinking that we're going to be way short of that, at least with current conditions. I'd like to think about kind of the concept of okay, what if we just went and built the liquor store up at the Tom Tabota site and gave that consideration as to what that outcome might be able to produce for not only just the liquor store operations itself, but also to enhance the remaining portion of the property at the Public Works Garage. If that would be something that would drive that site into possible more desirable status. I don't know, maybe we could enlist the help of the Chamber and the Downtown Business Group to engage in that discussion and talk about this parcel in terms of really what makes sense with this. Should we have the liquor store here as an anchor, or should we be looking at the liquor store somewhere else and something else being the anchor here that provides what's necessary? My attitude about the liquor store downtown is that it's not the right location because of the amount of traffic it gets, the truck traffic that ties up the alley or wherever it is that it's going to be located, and putting it into the downtown area complicates that, and it's going to complicate it for the next 50 years because that's where it's going to be. If we developed an alternate site, the Public Works Garage, that maybe that opens up the ability to redevelop the portions of that property that are sitting now off the tax roll and could potentially be valuable to some other business that might see a value in that property. I think we have to start thinking of other options,
I just don't know with everything that we went through and finding out that this location here really isn't of interest to others. I mean, the RFP process pretty much showed us that this isn't a viable spot. So if we take the liquor store and move it up there, which originally I was really for that, but with listening to Chris and with knowing that nobody's really interested in developing this piece because of the cost, I'm more inclined to say, let's leave the liquor store here. There's some things that we can do if the building is down to allow the truck traffic to get in, but the foot traffic, I guess I gotta go with him, and he should know, the foot traffic is really large here, and they get people from all the motels and different areas that walk here and then go back, or leave a restaurant, stop here, go back. We know that that's going to anchor, and whether that's the first floor and we could go up and develop a second floor, or I don't know that we want to become leasers of space, but we kind of do that right now and letting others use space that we have available. Are some of those groups amicable to move on up? Are there other businesses that would be interested in moving up? Would City Hall be able to move up or expand out? And maybe do we look at doing an RFP for the Tom DeBoda property, because is that desirable to anybody else? And then it could be on the tax rolls. Because I just don't know now what else would come here if we take the liquor store away. And again, we did ask the manager for his thoughts, and I don't just want to kick it to the side. He says this is a big foot traffic spot, then I guess I'm going to believe him a bit.
Well, we identified, the problems with the liquor store. We identified a fair number of those things,
Yeah.
And those are those things that we could fix with a new building here. I think we could. I mean, there would still be some hoops to jump through, but we certainly could. I'm wondering if like the RFP that we got basically showed that the numbers, even in their the proposal that they gave us, the numbers still were not awesome, right?
No.
But I'm wondering if the city redeveloped this, if there would be a way to make this work, if the city could develop it more like a professional building, like we talked about when we first started this conversation, we talked about what the needs for professional office space were in the community, and we were all kind of like, well, I don't know, maybe there's a need for that. And maybe this is the time to start asking around and try and figure out if there would be that kind of, would there be enough demand for professional office space in the community that we could then create that space here, And I know that gets us into leasers, but
well, and are we competing then with the business district or area that was kind of developed by EDA? I think that's what they were hoping up by law enforcement, was going to kind of expand a little bit to offer some of the professional buildings different things. If you add more professional buildings, my first thing is if you add more people down here, working down here, and asking others to come in, there's more of a parking issue, which we talked about just before.
Oh, that thing, right? Yeah. So, I mean, that's a fair thing. I mean, what Ivy just said. I've had a number of people who have said, like, just build a municipal parking ramp. And I've looked at how much parking ramps cost, and they're astronomically expensive. But it, I mean, if we're going to put everything on the table, why not? But
let's not.
No. And at some point, we have to solve the fact that this building is got to come down. Something has to be done. So
yeah.
Have you done any research on what a new liquor store might cost to build if the city did it?
Not to,
I mean, you guys were involved in this before I got on the city council, so I'm just wondering if anybody actually put a
we don't have any idea. I mean, we haven't sized it out, how big it needs to be. We've just got some ideas that maybe we'd like to double it in size.
Okay.
I think it's probably a couple $1 million. But now, that's just the liquor store, right?
Yeah, I know.
What about the rest of this space? And
You know, can I just say that if this was left for parking,
Well, this is,
you know, and then maybe future development, it is what we need. We do need that parking, and our businesses are clogged up by not having parking, and we're not seeing the business that we could have. So, you know, it doesn't mean it has to be forever parking, but if you move the liquor store, you would have parking for a while
so,
until you find a developer.
yeah,
What's so there's the smaller lot to the west from the road up into the municipal garage, right? The smaller piece, then there's a larger piece where the hotel was. Is there any size restrictions on like frontage? I mean, I suppose we're the city, we could do whatever. we
you do
want.
get to write the rules, that's helpful. Yeah.
So I guess I mean,
The smaller lot's about an acre.
yeah.
So, I mean, it looks like a smaller lot.
it's still pretty good size.
It's plenty big. I mean, this lot we have here is like half an acre,
Right.
including all the parking area. So even the smaller piece up there is more than big enough to do all of this.
Right, no, I guess I was thinking of it more in the, because I'm still stuck on the idea of trying to come up with something for down here that would do the liquor store, would do city offices, it would do other offices and meeting spaces for the different organizations that use the space. It could provide potential retail, because I don't think that there's really any empty storefronts that are waiting for somebody, the right person to rent the space. I mean, I think every space that has a storefront right now has a business operating in it. So way back during this meeting last July about the like business incubator side of things, which could be partnering with the EDA. But if those parcels up there were broken up into the, you know, for like another retail side, I guess what the ask would be to get those back onto the tax rolls as private development. You know, you don't have to sell the whole Tom Tabota property is what I was thinking, which would take, you know, then if you're gonna spend that much money on the land and the redevelopment, then you're gonna have to have some really, you're only gonna appeal to a certain number of developers that are gonna be interested in that, right?
I really think that site is conducive to housing development too. That it's got access to transportation, it's walkable to downtown, it's got plenty of room, it's got utilities. If you're thinking about what One Roof did in Lutzen, you could certainly do that here on that site. Get it back on the tax rolls with something we know there's a lot of demand for and that we've said we want.
Sure.
I mean, is that something that we could open an RFP for that property? I mean,
Well, would it be housing or would it be, I'll say hotel accommodations? Because I think sometimes we're a little short on some of that around here. That would work up there as well. That's why whoever wants to, I personally would not want to have my house right there looking either at the Public Works facility or Highway 61 and the what's across the road. But if somebody wants to buy it and do what they want to do within reasonable limits.
What was your idea?
confidential.
Okay.
But it's
yeah. So, well, let's try and bring this back into something we can talk about. So right now we've been looking at a couple of different options. One would be, do we try again for RFPs? You know, both for this property and or for the Tom Tabota property. Do we try and find partnerships and local developers down for this property down here? Do we move forward as the city, as the developer on this? What are we feeling about this property here? The things that I like about the city as developer is that the city stays in control. The city can sign something that we can at least tick off. We can tick off a number of those. we won't be able to do them all. The ones that we won't be able to do are, relatively significant in my mind as well, which is why I'm not convinced that that's the right decision. But I sure do like the time frame, as opposed to having it be another 3 to 4 years. The liquor store is it's choked out. Like I would.
Beyond.
I feel like maybe John drew that out where we shove everything, not that we're going to design this right now tonight, but like thinking about, I think it's true what Beth said about parking. Like if you're going to do retail and even City Hall, retail liquor, City Hall, and potentially some other sort of meeting and retail space, is what we have enough room, to leave a portion so that, it has to work with traffic flow. That's one thing I really got hung up on the RFP we got, or the design we got back. It's like, why would you put the parking in the back with like snow plowing, all those things, everything about it seemed really like just not understanding how traffic flows through town.
Mm-hmm.
But if you came down first past Bucks and just turned in and it was diagonal parking, and when you're done you pull out of the lot and there you got the stoplight to be able to get out on the highway, like you could set against the back line where the trees are, whoever owns that lot, an L-shaped building that lines the alley, so now you have a big open space, which kind of, however, that's what you pay engineers for, to figure out how you park things the best. And
I like landscape architects for that better.
Landscape architects. Engineers can tell you how fixed it for the slabs.
How big your roof
Well, and I
is.
also like if our street, if we had the liquor store that we're facing east, so that you're at the stoplight and you come right down and here it is.
The big sign
So
that
many
says
times
liquor and
people say, and
arrow.
it's like, well, before you get to the stoplight, there's a little one-way street that goes down. You know what? You go to the stoplight, you take a left or your right, and it's on your left or your right. There it is. People find it, boom, they do what they want, and they're gone.
I just think of that too, because even the walkability of, right now, if you followed the building as you walked, instead of coming out to here and going around, if you follow kind of the facade of that L-shaped, building, and it would put you right out over here by Bucks, and you connect back into the downtown section or cross over to the shops, across the street. I don't know. I guess I'd be I guess I don't know how far you go into it. I agree with what their recommendations were. I think doing site analysis and doing like geotech and some of that stuff, so we know exactly what needs to happen, is important. I know Tim really wants to move it up to the top of the hill, but
Well, I just see
I'm not
that the
opposed to
liquor
that.
store is such an important tax relief for city residents, and if that liquor store can expand and generate more revenue, it might be more than would be generated on the taxes that would be produced down here.
Sure.
Increased taxes, and if that was the case, whatever happened down here, might be more beneficial. Whether it's parking or whether it's some other type of use that exists long term, but even if it's just parking, the potential for this lot then is still there.
Well,
into the future. So
As a downtown business owner, I'd be scared to lose the liquor store up to the top of the hill, creating a second center of activity. I think it looks like two harbors where they're downtown lost to the highway.
I would like to see, personally, if I want to condense it and come back to what we're talking about, I'd love to see an RFP on the Tom Tabota site, and even whether they want to keep that 1 acre in there, or if that's something separate, or we want to hang on to it because that's where we would want to move City Hall potentially, to have only a liquor store here. There still could be a second floor for something and open up more parking, but my preference right now, and listening to some other things, is to do an RFP up there and move ahead as city building a liquor store down here. But that's my thought.
I wonder if we, I wonder what other options we have, really. I mean, when we look at the response to the RFP, of course, we have lots of options. We could put a lot of different resources into this. We could put a lot of time in this. Or we could just move ahead, as trying to develop it into what we know works in this space and doing what we know works in this space better. I don't know. I flip-flop back and forth, but I would agree about the Tom Tabota property that, that is a much bigger property, and it has a very different, profile to it as far as what could happen there. I mean, we might get a lot more developers interested in that property, just because of the needs of our community and the size of that property. What does everybody else think about that? Anybody?
I just,
For the liquor store? I mean,
Well, I was thinking
Or
keep the
City
liquor store
Hall.
here
oh,
and
you're
keeping the
saying
liquor
turn-
store.
doing RFPs
Doing
for
an
private
RFP up
development
there.
for up there.
Yeah, for what could be possible up
keeping
there.
the
Whether
liquor
that,
store here.
yeah, keeping liquor store and city hall down here. I don't think that
But
we
I
have a
understand
viable
why-
option of what would replace it.
I guess my thing on that is like, what's the point of doing that if we're not
They're
gonna
gonna
have
want-
any city things up there? Like, why would we spend the money and the resources and the time to try and figure out what somebody else can come up with on property that we could potentially sell on the market?
So we just want to put it
So
up
we
on
could
sale.
like, well, I mean, that
mean-
would be my response to that idea.
That's fair.
one RFP would even entice one person we had to look at this property was the fact they could use the liquor store for a tenant.
Right. That says
And
something.
now if you're asking for an RFP there's not gonna be a tenant there, now you're.
I mean, I think if we were looking at the downtown site here, this site for the liquor store, I mean, personally, I would think that the liquor store should be a standalone operation to take this.
Is there other properties within the city?
Develop,
Maximize
city
that.
develop it
Suitable.
and maximize the liquor store operations so that it has adequate parking, delivery service, access. I mean, this idea of using the alleys for delivery service, I mean, to me is a non-starter for me. I mean, that is a problem, and it has been a problem for, you can't drive down the alley.
Well, and
Well, that's a challenge.
part of why
To make it work.
I brought it up is like the city moving forward doing this. So if we're doing a limited operation here, we know the things that work in this space. Can we do them the best we possibly can in this space? How does that look? That's probably something to look into.
But I think you could easily fit, if we didn't try and expand some of those other things, like the other, stuff that I brought up, like other retail spaces, so you are now having this pretty giant footprint, and you want to try and do liquor store with parking, adequate parking. I mean, the simple solution seems to go with, a two-story structure, and you put City Hall, and, I mean, if the liquor store is as large as what we're kind of talking about, to potentially over double the size we have now, and, then we can certainly fit City Hall, and we can fit,
We can fit everybody.
everybody.
I mean, when we
Upstairs.
did that back at the napkin sketches, let's double City Hall, or let's double the liquor store, and let's right-size City Hall, and let's stop wasting all this space in the middle. It's probably not any bigger than the building we're in right now.
Right.
And the way that we're laid out on this lot is really inefficient. There's a lot of
Especially if you
wasted
stack
space.
up on top with office space, right, keeping the retail on the lower level.
I mean, you wouldn't even have to stack if you're just talking about the existing tenants here, and you'd still be able to do a better job of all the things that we're doing on this site.
And parking.
So, what I would propose is, if that's what you want to explore more, we need some professional assistance in answering some of those questions. So let's invest a little money in getting some drawings on how do we lay this out. Let's get our needs assessments kind of formalized and have some architectural drawings, just site plan even, of how do we lay this out so that we've got parking that we feel is adequate, so that we've got the best loading situation, so that we've got
Public
pedestrian, public restrooms, yeah, all that stuff. And get a couple ideas for you to look at.
I mean, what do you guys think about that? I mean, I do think that that's a way to move forward. I think that that way we could actually answer more of our questions. We are putting time and energy into this project no matter which way we look at it. We may as well, like if we're looking at one of these options straight square in the face, we've been given a couple of pretty well-defined options, and we've been slowly checking boxes and marking things off that don't seem like they're really viable. Why not just go straight for this one and see if there's any big hurdles we run into that would push us in a different direction.
Well, is there anything saying that if we did do something about this site and how that would be laid out, and we're like, that's maybe not quite right, we couldn't just take some of those design ideas that Cat and plunk it up onto the top of the hill, and it's like, wow, we just now this is going to become surface parking, and versus trying to get them to do two different proposals for us. I feel like let's figure out what the space is and figure out, once we know that, we should be able to pretty easily overlay. We know if it would work here, it certainly would work up there with the added benefit of extra parking.
We actually did that with the Public Works facility. Our first drawings were in the business park.
Right.
I mean, the nice thing here is both sites are flat.
Yeah.
How rare is that in this town?
Right.
So, I think that we wouldn't want to spend a lot of resources even thinking or talking about the Tom DuBois site if we're going to focus our energy on getting a design here. So we could certainly list it for sale anytime you wanted, but I guess I'd recommend we just leave it in a holding pattern until we know more about this and you have some better intentions.
I would agree. Does that sound like a path forward on that then? Does anybody have any concerns? It's a lot of quiet here.
I like it.
I think it's a path forward. I still think we're potentially missing an opportunity to have something, better at the Tom DuBois site. Just because my belief is that there's a lot of traffic on the highway that doesn't get to our liquor store just because they don't see it. There's not parking down here. There's not good access to it. It's going to be more challenging when the Highway 61 project changes the First Street turnoff of Highway 61. The visibility won't be there. Seeing the liquor store. You've heard me. So.
And I've thought that. I don't disagree with you, Tim. I've thought that too. But when I sit here and really think in my head the times that I've tried to come down, if you try to come downtown on a Saturday afternoon, a Fisherman's to get to the liquor store, parking is nil. But somehow if you manage to find a spot and get in there, there are no shortage of people in there either, and somehow they're finding a way to get there.
It's a very successful going concern. The trick I got with this is we don't have any assurances that if we do something to the liquor store, it's going to create a result. If we double the size, does it give us any guarantees about a different type of return? No, we don't, and we don't have any way of determining that. So I'm sure you're right that we could be more efficient, but I also know that there's very few people that have intended to go buy something from us at the liquor store and have decided not to because of access was difficult.
I think those points, like if you listen to the tape and when you put together an RFP, those things that Tim just listed, I think if those are the key factors that we're looking for, and
we're asking our design team to deal with
how it works with the the deliverability, the accessibility, and the parkability of being able to get there. And not as town sits right now, but as the redesign happens, like how will that integrate and how can we integrate that through? Like if those solutions were satisfied, that.
Yeah, my thought is that I would want the liquor store to be the best it could be to generate that just additional value to the city, because that's directly impacts our local taxes. And if we miss out on that opportunity,
in retail, where I think we'd see our return is that we can actually, if we have the storage space, we can buy a larger volume, which means you decrease the price you're paying, but it doesn't necessarily change what you're charging. It might not.
Increased our storage space pretty dramatically this year. I don't know if you've all been back there and seen, but
there's been changes, but
a lot of that, what used to be pretty forgotten space, is now liquor storage, which is good. That's helped, but still, there's a lot of things that we need to do better on this piece of property.
Right.
You know, just having a better inventory would make a huge difference. I mean, those of us who are in retail, you know, space, inventory equals dollars, as long as you've got traffic. And
So, yeah, and I think that what we're talking about is getting, you know, some of our design friends to help us do that.
So then that would be the last policy question I would pose to you. When I say some of our design friends, I imagine just the same team. And if that works for you, I'm going to call them tomorrow.
Have they designed liquor stores, though? Are they,
I mean, LHB's designed a lot of stuff. If you want to talk to them about it, we could have that conversation first and make sure it's still a good fit. We could
Right.
have them come to a meeting and talk to us about it.
You could give Tracy a call. She did a lot of work on this.
She did. There is one firm that was kind of a niche municipal liquor store designer. We could talk to them too. So that's the question. Do you want me to just go get the group back together that we know we can do a successful project with, but we're not sure if this is their wheelhouse, or do we want to open that up and go through a process to find a designer?
We have to be a member of some association that can help with the, right, like general layout and.
No. I mean, yes and no. That's one of our first contacts we made. We had some of our folks from the MMUA, or the MEA, sorry, the Minnesota Municipal Beverage Association come, and there's some managers with a lot of experience that were very helpful in talking to us, but they also kind of made it clear that there isn't any formulas you can count on.
Space and space.
Yeah, and when it comes to laying out a store, I think there's a lot of expertise there that we'd rely on, but there's not a lot of specialized expertise there necessarily. It's just kind of common sense retail expertise that we're doing most of wrong with the space laid out as we have now, but that, you know, from a fresh palette, we'll be able to start it over.
Craig, do you have any thoughts on this? Just curious.
Yeah, but I'm not quite sure how to approach this.
All right.
I have an open meeting right now, but I'm just looking at the possibilities of what are you trying to accomplish? You want a liquor store that is in the city, has walking distance, parking. You also, what do you want for City Hall? Because we're going to kind of like, I think do you want both these topics to kind of somewhat work together or not work together? City Hall would be kind of nice to be in town, walking distance, and parking.
They're both,
I mean,
uses that are going to be successful wherever we put them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like both are they're sites that people will find when they need them, but they're also both something that brings something to a neighborhood. You know, a really successful retail going concern and an institutional use that's kind of solid and unchanging, that both really add something to a neighborhood. So it's not so much about what we want to get for those buildings, because I think we can accomplish that on any site. So then it's more about what do we want to get for this site. And if we don't need to get anything from this site, well then, yeah, we should build a liquor store up at Tom Tabota and it'll be fine. If we still want to get those things that you said we do, then I think we need to build it ourselves here.
So,
I'd just like to put a plug, I know you're not really discussing this, but some workforce housing, if you had apartment buildings up at the Tom Tabota site,
yeah.
that would be a good use of that space.
Mhm.
I feel like using that space like for housing makes more sense than having this space down here become a place for doing that. Like it would be a easier offer for that part, whatever happens up there.
Be cheaper to build it up there.
Yeah.
It would also be the impact on the neighborhood up there would be much easier to address. We saw what it looked like in the drawing here, and it was, whoa, that's a lot of potential parking and
that was really
impact.
congested. So what does everyone? I mean, I do think that at the least we have a space needs assessment. We need to be looking into more specifically. I feel pretty comfortable at least starting the conversation with LHB, and then seeing if they have any suggestions for other firms that would be more into this specifics of this.
Is an architectural firm gonna shoot you to
Well,
somebody
they probably
else?
have partners.
No, I'd ask them a different way. I think
Yeah,
if you want to talk to them, let's get them here soon and let's hear their pitch. And if you're comfortable working with them, they can demonstrate to you that they have the expertise to do this, that they've got the projects under their belt to do this. Great. If not, then we'll open it up.
I think that's a way to start. What do you guys think?
I think it keeps us moving on this thing, and, you know,
That's important.
yeah.
And then we can keep the conversation going as well if we can actually start putting more ideas together or putting more thoughts to the conversations that we've had. So, should we move forward like that until we're faced with other things?
Sounds good.
Okay, I'm seeing some nods, so we'll go ahead with that.
Okay.
Okay. So, all right. So we do have two things that we need to add. We've got a couple memos to hand out here.
Let's do the easy one and then not quite the silly one.
Yep.
I don't have an application like we did last time.
It's a good question. You should ask that.
I will.
Come on.
Mike?
Because we don't normally bring that level of detail to the council when we do hiring.
Okay.
It's all available if you'd like to look at it, but
Okay.
the key point here is that Fire Chief Silence is asking for this.
Right,
percentage.
last time we had
Yeah.
this is only the second time for me, and one time we had it, and one time we don't,
Sometimes-
so.
And there's a lot of information on there that, no. So,
All right.
if
So
you'd be so kind,
this one's pretty easy.
the note I got from Ben was, actually, it might have been from Aaron, was, and he's really qualified. So, please hire.
With that, I
Donald
would make a
Robley.
motion to hire Donald Robley as a firefighter.
Great.
I will
there's a
second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hooray for more
Yeah.
firefighters.
Yes, indeed. Now,
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you to
Opposed?
him.
Carries.
another really quick, not quite as fun. I'll just give you a minute to look at this one.
So this one, I'm assuming this comes from Dave. Yeah.
This comes from Paul, this comes from Dave.
Okay.
So that's why we have probationary periods, because sometimes this is not a good fit, and this was not a good fit. So we're asking that Mr. Larson be dismissed from employment for not complying with his probationary requirements.
I will make the motion that we dismiss him from employment.
Motion, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. All right. So then moving right along, council and staff reports. Craig, what do you got? You got anything?
I was at a meeting with you guys, so I missed my park board meeting, but what I got out of it was they decided not to allow the Boulder Park area to be used for the helicopter.
The park board?
Yeah. And I think they asked, I'm not sure who's asking, or somebody asking the Lions Club to maybe look for a different site. I don't know. I wasn't at the meeting.
Yeah, we informed the Lions Club of that decision, and I gave Gene a couple suggestions if you wanted to keep working on it.
Do we know why I guess I was surprised to see that, because it didn't go before the park board and then come to us. It came directly to us.
Then to the
And then
park
it
board.
went,
Yeah.
then somehow went to the park board and
Yeah.
they denied it, and we don't know why
Feels
after
a
it
little
came
awkward.
to us.
Normally, when we're doing this process for Fisherman's Picnic, we do both at the same time, because there's an ask for the space that's in the park, and then there's an ask for the streets areas that's not controlled by the park board, and just for expediency, we run them both at the same time. There's not normally changes. In this case, this was a new idea, and I guess I wasn't aware of the schedule it was going through the park board. I probably wouldn't have planned it this way, to have them not review it until you had already made some decisions about it. But we're not really sure why, but they do have the control of that site, so it is their decision.
Well, ultimately, I know it's their decision, but ultimately it could come back.
City council.
It's the city council's decision if we could So did we not go further in having discussions with Chris about anything, or?
We did,
I
actually.
mean, we
Well,
told them we were gonna
we
do
asked-
some things,
We asked
and,
for a more definitive,
They brought us some
Measurement.
insurance information, they brought us a map. We were moving forward as intended at your last meeting to have it come back to you here, but it's a moot point at that location with the park board's decision.
well, I kind of feel like we said we would do some things, and I kind of feel like we need to do our due diligence, and still have the conversation. I'm happy to have the conversation, actually, didn't have time to talk with them, but I'd like to know why the park board did it. You know, what kind of homework did they do? Because actually, I had somebody put it before the Downtown Business Council as to how did they feel about this happening. There were not objections. Now, somebody else who I know is missing from the meeting that represented some of the hotels and said they had some concerns for noise, but, you know, I know there was talk about somebody saying, well, it competes with the music, but that's a Lions issue to me. That's not a city council issue. It's them putting it on, not the city of Grand Marais. So if the Lions feel like they could have some of these things competing, I don't know that it's up to me to tell them they can't, but I kind of feel like the process got pushed around and just went no, and we don't know why, and we didn't get to come back and answer them the way we said we would. I don't know if anybody else thinks that.
How does that work? I mean, I know that there's been things that have come from like the planning commission that have gone through the planning commission that we have turned down. Is there ever times where like the planning commission says, no, we shouldn't do this, and it doesn't make it?
It just never makes it to
It
us
never
then?
makes it to us?
No, the planning commission it's a different relationship between the planning commission and the council and the park board and the council.
Okay.
And anytime a planning commission says no, they're making a recommendation, and that recommendation is passed to the council for action.
Sure.
When it comes to the park board, they set the rates, they operate the park,
Sure.
they make the rules about how the park spaces are used. The council's role is to appoint park board members, to approve the budget, and to determine which properties are controlled by the park board and which are not.
Sure.
But you don't really have the authority to overrule them on park-related issues on that property.
And I wasn't saying that that's like I wanted to do that. I just
Yeah.
was trying to.
Right.
I didn't know the process, I guess.
So that's why this feels awkward, because you maybe, were put on a path that we never should have put you on in the first place, and it's just completely unintentional. Normally these things happen concurrently, and, if they would have said no problem, then we wouldn't be here, but
Well, what if we just said no problem when they were here last meeting?
And then the park board would have said something.
and if the park board says no, then it's still no.
Okay, all right.
Well, I guess that's,
So in this case, this is an activity that the park board would have to approve the activity, but there's still some council action because of that license agreement that Chris would recommend.
Sure.
So you could potentially say no to the license agreement on an activity like that. Or if they came back with an alternate location that wasn't that location, and there's a few that, none of them are perfect, right? But there's a few others they could look at. You could approve a license for some other private properties where they could conduct that activity.
So do I understand that, are you saying we have no authority over the park board and the decisions they make? Is that a correct statement?
over there.
I mean, I'm not going to
Over
make
the
that
park board.
100%, but it's pretty close. Chris, do you want to weigh in at all on that question?
that relationship.
I don't know what the relationship is. It'd be something that we'd have to look into, and it would depend entirely on whether or not they're a statutorily created park board, and if statutorily created, are there any limitations on their authority? What's their enabling resolution or ordinance say? I mean, I'd have to look into that.
Because I know, and I speak from experience, Chris, I was the president of the park board back in the 90s and a member of it. And we used to have to answer to the council. We had to come before the council. We would make recommendations and everything else, but the council at the time, again, this is in the 90s, so it's not that the council had the ultimate authority. So that's where my confusion, or I should say lack of education between changes from then to now is.
And I generally advocate for that relationship regardless of what
Right.
the rules
Oh,
and the
yeah.
code says, because you actually do have the ultimate authority. You get to decide which property they have control of. So that is the ultimate authority. You also get to appoint their members. in a case like this where we're talking about an activity that's occurring on a property that you've asked them to manage, I don't even think it's about the ordinance as much as it's about how do we want to have that relationship established. And you've asked them to manage that
channels.
property, and they're doing it.
Yeah.
So
Okay, yeah, it felt really backwards, and
Yeah.
it was like, felt like we kind of said, well, we'll look at it, and somebody else said no, and so it was just
Yeah, that doesn't
uncomfortable.
Seem,
yeah.
Well, like I wasn't at the meeting, and neither was Dave, so I do not know how it was presented or talked about. I did, prior to the meeting though, I did make a recommendation. When I went down to talk to Sam, because I told her I was not going to be at the meeting, I said, if they're having trouble making a decision or whatnot, they should watch the presentation that they made to the city council, and maybe that would help them. But of course, that would have been after the meeting, after the fact. But because I don't know if they were privy to what this meeting was about and the presentation that was done. I don't know if they went on to watch it or not. But I just thought maybe that might help them in making a decision,
or
whatever that might have been.
Well, if you just want to close the circle on this, we'll ask the park staff to get some feedback from the board and just at least try to explain how that decision was made.
Yeah.
That'd be fine.
Well, I see some of the
some
members
meetings,
I can ask too. I just, like I said, it felt really uncomfortable that it went that route, so.
Anything else?
No,
That's
well,
kind of a big
they're
one.
doing some painting on something I can't. So I just got a quick little blip on some lean-tos that they have some lean-tos or something along the path, or cleaning those up and painting those. And there really wasn't much on the agenda except for like 2 or 3 items. So
Okay.
that's all I got.
Okay. Anton?
I don't have anything, I don't think. One thing I guess I wanted to ask about is, I know that I had somebody ask me, this is at the golf course, so I don't know, maybe it's not us, maybe it's the golf. I should talk to the park board about it, or Dave T or something, but there was offered in the past like punch cards for carts, which are things that have been purchased and you can buy them and you punch them, but now they're not being honored anymore. So like people have full cards from last year and they're not able to use them now. And I don't know if it's because of like the point of sale, but it was, it's members and people that are like locals that golf there. I know it got brought up to me at Men's League. So
Dave.
Yeah, I'd say bring it up with Dave, and that's a question the park board can deal with.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's it.
Tim?
Just one thing, the Planning Commission did receive maps that were prepared by our consultant looking at the housing stuff and trying to kind of just provide us with some background information on housing usage, short-term rentals, where city sewer and water, utilities, electric were available. We just got those yesterday, day before.
Last week.
You got them last week? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. How time flies.
You already gave us your feedback a couple of days.
Well, I know, I already, yeah, but, and so I don't know if the council is gonna get those maps or be able to provide any feedback to, I mean, the planning commission received them, and I don't know if, Patrick, you've, heard any response from any of the other planning commission members, but,
Well, we tentatively scheduled for next Wednesday evening to have the consultant come and present the information that they've got. You're all certainly invited to that, but it's still tentatively scheduled as far as I'm concerned. One of my projects for tomorrow is to spend a few hours going through all the maps and all the feedback and decide, are we ready for this or are we not? And so I'll let you know tomorrow.
And is that a planning commission meeting?
It'll be for the planning commission. I'll throw some invites out to some other folks who I think might be interested in it. We'll be videoing it and making it broadly available for anyone to look at ever. But we're not going to make it, we're not advertising it widely and trying to draw a lot of people, but of course it's a public meeting and anybody can show up.
so that's the first stage of that process.
Cool.
So,
The other thing that happened at the meeting was they talked about trailers. And remember the question that was asked of them was, do you think there's an intermediary step that we should try to do with this ordinance to just make some of these obvious issues go away? And their answer was no. They think that the right path is to just go through the entire process of deciding the purpose of the code enforcement and then crafting the ordinance around that rather than making an intermediary step. So I guess their recommendation is that we're holding off on enforcement a little while longer.
Jump in with both feet. And we looked at the same
That's how we-
photos that we saw at the council meeting, and they were perplexed by the complications of how the side yard and the rear yard and the front yard were described and what these applications looked like. And there didn't seem to be any real consistency between the locations where they were allowed and where they weren't allowed. And I mean, it's just, so I think the Planning Commission felt that this wasn't a tweak of the ordinance or a quick fix. It was that was going to take some major work. Because, I mean, think about it, this ordinance was at least 1977 and maybe older, and what has happened in the last number of years, we just have to get a better handle on what it is that we're trying to accomplish through having an ordinance. And I mean, we recognize people are going to have travel trailers, RVs, that kind of thing. And what is it that we're really trying to say?
Right.
What are we trying to regulate? And, our ordinance right now doesn't seem to address that very well.
Okay. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Kelly?
Nothing for meetings. I only have a question as to, I'm wondering if we could possibly get packets earlier at all. I'm struggling to get through stuff and feel like I am somewhat informed. I don't want to use educated, but if it could happen, one of the local boards does things a week before. I don't know if that's possible or not.
It's possible in the sense that
It probably means more of these.
It's not last minute stuff.
well, and if you want to cut that out too, we don't have to allow last minute stuff. That if we want more diligence in the schedule, it probably just means things come slower or the meetings get longer. But it's certainly possible, yeah. And right now we're sending them out on Fridays. I don't think it'd be a big stretch to send them out on Thursdays. Getting it to sending them out on Wednesdays, I think there's a lot more possibility of things like this occurring that then have to wait potentially 2 weeks, or you're dealing with it. But yeah, you tell me when you want them, and that's when we'll do them.
I don't like to make anybody wait, but I also don't like to come in and do a job that I'm not well equipped to do. I don't think that's fair to the public, and I don't feel it's fair to me or to the rest of you who I serve with. I don't know what anybody else's thoughts are. I don't care if it came to me Wednesday at 5 o'clock. It would still give me a week, but Fridays are shot, Saturday, Sunday, because I work full-time. I try to get a few other family things and catch up at home, and then it's trying to get some of this in, along with other emails that I didn't even see today because I am working full-time for somebody else, so I'm not on their clock trying to do this work. So I don't know what other people think, if anybody else is, or if this works just fine.
I could always use more time.
I think for me, it really comes down to the complexity of it, I think. Like if you have there's a 20-page addition to our packet, and it's got all kinds of, last meeting had a couple of those, I think, that were really with the Bucks agreement and then whatever, the MnDOT thing, right? And it's like, I could use 2 weeks to probably try and, but that's also hard too, right? Because then the city's up against the deadline. And maybe I'm putting too much confidence in what Chris does, but I feel like that's my fallback often, is to know that the city staff and have worked with Chris to, I have to try and understand, but I don't have to totally understand it.
No, I know, but
I totally
I'm
am in
putting my
agreement.
name to
I'm
something that,
Oh, yeah, no, I'm in agreement with you.
Now, those items from the previous meeting that was 3 hours long, we actually did send them out more than a week in advance. So, when we have a complicated item and we have it available earlier, we're already sending it out earlier. But there's, our practice has been most of the stuff's arriving on Friday.
Sure.
So, if you want us to move that up, we can do that.
I would love it, but I don't know, again, what other people think or how soon or how late they want it. And maybe some people don't sit and look at it until 11 o'clock Tuesday night or 5 o'clock Wednesday afternoon. I don't know what people are doing.
Depends on.
Jay, you said you would like more time. What works for you?
More time, but I'm not going to define that.
Great, thanks.
I can make stuff. I can
good
make
luck.
stuff work. Let's try moving it up to Thursday. See if that addresses the concerns, and then
Yeah, I think that would help. And then also, it's all about the complexity of the issue,
Right.
I mean, today was a lot of like last minute things, but it kind of fell off the tail end of what we already did the last meeting. I got that, but I still had questions. I happened to talk to you earlier before the meeting, so I kind of got that in sideways, but if you can't
Yeah.
leave your job to talk, you don't.
No, I
so I
can't.
do understand that.
And I can take 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there maybe for something, but I can't sit and discuss a 20 or 30-minute phone call on
Right.
somebody else's dime.
Right.
I won't,
I
so.
gotcha.
Well, I don't have to work the same schedule that you do, though, so if you need to have some time that you want to go over stuff,
I know.
I can work that out.
You have family
Yep.
time too.
But I can have family time different times.
It's-
I'm not offering to give you my weekend. I'm just telling you, if we need to work, we're talking 5:30, we can find a time.
Okay, so let's just try Thursdays for the
Okay.
packet, and then if we need more, then we can.
Thank you.
We can address it again.
I appreciate that, because I want to be able to do a good job.
I had anything else? Okay, I had the Creative Economy Collaborative met yet again and was talking about they were going through their governing documents again, just kind of finishing that up, and it was really good. They were really kind of dialing it up to a realistic view of what they're working on. They also are talking about the parking project, or like parking, and also talking about their potential participation in signage and how the flow of the downtown could work with that. So it's good to know that we got lots of allies on that front. That was about all that I can remember to that. So that's it. Do you have anything?
So again, next Wednesday, we'll advise that you certainly don't have to attend. All that information will be available for you to review at your own schedules if you're not there. Then just my schedule, the week after that, I'll be taking some time. I'm going to be paddling from the 23rd to the 26th. So the plan right now is to be back in time for the meeting, but things happen. So you'll be in good hands if I'm not here. You can talk to LHB without me. And then the 27th and 28th, the League of Minnesota Cities Annual Conference is in Duluth. And they've asked me to come down there and help them evaluate their programming. So I said, okay, I will. So I won't be around much that week.
Cool. And on the 27th, I'm going to be down in the cities speaking at a panel about millennials in rural Minnesota. So that'll be.
Are you
interesting.
gone for the Wednesday night meeting?
No,
then, the night before?
I'll leave after the meeting to go down, and then I'll be there on the 27th, and then I'll drive back up. Pain in the butt. But Tim does it all the time. Anybody else? Anything else? We are adjourned.
Thank you for your help tonight, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Good night.
You're welcome. Good night, everybody.
I have to go home.